And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for your favorite podcast filmed in Cedar Rapids, Iowa from the Dance Garage Studios. It's A Mile in Your Shoes with your host, Wedge Stevens. Hello, everybody. Hello. We got to put the camera on. I always forget to do that. That's so weird. Hey, you guys gave me extra applause today. I really appreciate that. 22 seconds of applause. That's fantastic. Thank you guys very much. Welcome to A Mile in Your Shoes. I am Wedge Stevens. I'm your host today. And I got to tell you, we've got a fantastic show lined up for you. We're not going to do a whole lot of hubbub beforehand. I know we got a few things we have to do. But we're going to get started here really quick. Just want to give you a quick update on something really fun. Dance Garage Studio right here in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. If you want to come and dance with these fine young ladies and have some good times, please let them know. And if you tell them the sexy ogre sent you, you get a free class. Isn't that fun? Who doesn't like free things? I like free things. It's just I have 2 left feet and 4 right ones, so I can't really dance very well. Hey, we got a... I wasn't prepared. Does this shock you? It shouldn't. Surprises me a little bit that I'm still on the air, but hey, where you are. I know it's been a week since I've talked to you guys. You guys doing all right? Everything going okay? You guys, yeah, good? All right. Hey, if you want to follow us on social media, we do have a Twitter account, A Mile in Your Shoes, AMILEIN, capital U, capital R, SHOES on the Twitter. You can also follow me at Wedge Stevens on the Twitter. If you want to be a part of the production and all that, you can reach us at thesexyogre@gmail.com. Also, you can email me at wedgestevens@gmail.com for our Ask Wedge episodes that are coming up very soon. Won't that be fun? The days in which we don't have any clients and all that. Hey, just to give you an update on our weekly thing, what we call it, the episode, what we're calling this? It's called the, sorry, As the Car Wheel Turns, right? I gotta tell you, buying a car is really hard these days. People are really scandalous. Like, case in point, we talked about the last episode about all the shenanigans that happened. The last dealership I went to, let me tell you about this. They advertised a car. I called about it. Whatever. It's in recall. That's fine. But, like, the first sales guy's like, did the usual sales trick, like, hey, leave me 5 minutes, I'll call you back, and, if you give me your number and all that, okay, so you're just trying to get me information, put me in the up book and all that, whatever. He never called back. I'm still waiting for that phone call. That was like a month ago, still waiting. So I called back again a few hours later. They gave me a sales manager who hung up on me. Are you kidding me? Now, the only reason I called back a third time is because the car advertised had 33,000 miles on it, or so they said. When I finally got a hold of a new guy, he's like, yeah, that's not accurate. That car's got 80-some thousand miles on it. I was like, you got to be joking me. Are you kidding me? Well, I agreed to go see the car. That's fine, whatever. So I went down, I drove the car. It was what it was. The sales guy, Colin, was very nice, super nice guy. He was great. The new car manager, Kim, was very, very good. I liked him as well. But they'd sold the car before I took the test drive. So I took someone's car that they had just bought on a test drive with a salesperson because the people didn't know what the hell they were doing. Like, I can't catch a break. And then, come to find out, the car wasn't sold after all, after they told me it was, and I'd already left the dealership. All right. This is why people hate buying cars. This is what happens. People hate buying cars. Anyway, so we have a very exciting guest today, and I can't wait to get started. So we're going to do the secret word of the day really quick. Hey, big shout out right away because our secret word of the day is being sponsored today. It's sponsored today by our good friends at Locker Room Legends. And I'll tell you why this is a big deal. Sports memorabilia is the most counterfeit things out there. So when people are buying things like, hey, I got this autographed or whatever, you don't really know if it's true or not, if it's accurate. Well, Dan has always been very, very good about everything that he sells. In fact, everything he sells is guaranteed 100% authentic. It is fantastic. He's a great, great individual. You can find him at Lindale Mall in Cedar Rapids. And if you ever just need something, let him know. Sometimes he can find it, sometimes he can't. But he's a really great person. He's been doing this for a really long time. And I know that you're paying a little more extra from buying it from a shop, but you're paying for that peace of mind that you know that whatever you're buying is genuine, real, and authentic. So make sure you check out Dan at Locker Room Legends in lower level of Lindale Mall. Why buy good when you can buy legendary? I just All right. So our secret word of the day, as we all know, if the word gets said during the podcast, the person who says it wins a prize. This is fantastic. This is fun, right? So our secret word of the day is this. Ooh, my T is backwards. My dyslexia is showing up. W-A-T-E-R. All right. So there you go. Secret word of the day. That is done. Jerry, you ready? All right. So my guest today, native New Yorker, he's a fantastic human being, a wonderful person to be around, and I've known him for a long time, so he has to be really great. Please welcome my good friend, Jerry. Woo! I have to make sure I turn the applause off because one time I forgot. Oh, I didn't bring my phone with me. We're going to have to keep time in a different way. Hey, Jerry, how's it going?
Very good. I'm so glad to be here. I'm excited. I'm pumped up.
I'm glad you're here.
I told my kids about it this morning, and they looked at me, you're doing what?
Really?
I guess I slipped telling them. My wife I did, but the kids were totally...
Well, you told the important person.
What and why. But I said to have a good time.
Yeah? I'm glad you're here. We've been trying to arrange this for a few weeks now.
Yes.
We had some scheduling issues.
Yes.
But hey, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad to see you. I know that you were just battling the COVID.
Yes.
So I'm glad to see that you recovered.
Yeah, finally I think I have my strength back.
Yeah? How are you feeling?
Not too bad.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Did you have like this full-blown COVID, or was this the new like cold variant? Or?
No, I don't want to make COVID political. I have no feelings about it, but I believe I had no more than a summer cold.
Okay.
I've had colds my whole life, and there were no symptoms that were other than a common cold.
Right, and you did test positive, like they tested.
Which my wife told me that the common cold has been known as COVID for years and years and years.
I didn't
She's
know
in
that.
the medical field. And I said, that's surprising. But all of a sudden, everything you get now is COVID.
Right.
Because we all had it, my wife and two kids. Karen was mostly just coughing. She's always been prone to bronchitis. So we assumed it was that. My son, Jesse, just had headaches and a little congestion. And Angela, I think also was just some congestion. And to me, all four of us had colds.
Wow.
Yet we all were quarantined. And Karen and I actually, our GP up at Virginia Gay Hospital, recommended that we go for this new IV infusion.
Okay.
We went up to St. Luke's. It's a 2-hour procedure. And it's supposed to put antibodies in your system to hopefully prevent maybe the variants or anything
kind
like that
give you
coming
like a
back.
big booster and all that.
Yeah, and there was no side effects or anything.
Okay,
it was just, kind of routine.
Well, I'm glad that you came through at the other side well and healthy and ready to go. Hey, we talked about the charities and all that. We're going to do a charity wheel spin right now, just so that we can advertise our charities. Now, last time we did Backpacks for Hunger. If you don't know about that, that's great. Okay. We also have Better Together. You know who those guys inventing. Beat Cancer Today, the English River Outfitters Resort, Children's Cancer Connection, Patriots for Pets, who I really love, Families Helping Families. Go ahead and spin it and let's see what we get.
Feel like I'm on Wheel of Fortune.
No, that's the idea. Oh, good. Patriots for Pets. These are fantastic people. Actually, my dog came from Patriots for Pets. Do you know anything about these guys?
I've heard the name, but I don't know anything about
they're
it.
up in Storm Lake, Iowa, and they are a military-based organization that goes into high-risk situations to rescue animals and then bring them back, help kind of get them used to people, and then they help veterans acquire animals, especially those who need animals for support and things like that. Yeah. So my dog is actually a former dogfighting dog that they went into Texas and they took her out of that situation and they brought her up, they rehabbed her, and now she lives with me. Her name's Paris. She's wonderful.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I really like it. So and if you're a military veteran, you get a massive discount, but they also make the prices high enough so that if you are wanting to adopt an animal, that they know you're going to take care of it by paying that much money for it. So please check out Patriots for Pets. They're amazing. I love them. They're so great. So there you go.
Okay.
All right. Well, we can get started. So you have a little bit of an accent. I'm guessing you're not from Iowa.
Okay, I will have to explain accents to you. I have done this throughout my 19, 20 years here in Iowa.
Okay.
People detect or they think I have the accent. However, I explained to them that since the country was settled east to west, we speak properly,
Oh, is
and everybody else has come up with these accents.
is that what it is?
That's my logic. Now, I've traveled pretty extensively all over the country, the South, the West Coast, the Midwest, obviously, even out to Hawaii. And I believe the people in Philadelphia, and I'm very careful how I say Philadelphia. A New Yorker would say Philadelphia if you detected the difference.
Okay.
But anyhow, the Philadelphians, I think, speak the purest American English, followed by the Midwesterners.
Okay.
Everybody else is down the tubes. California, the Deep South, and of course we have Boston. You know, they pack their cars in garages. So I don't know what kind of English
Drink the
that is.
coffee.
But just to enlighten people who are listening and don't really know much about New York, even within New York, we have several accents.
Okay. Yeah.
If you're from the Bronx, where I am originally from, there's the so-called Bronx accent.
Okay.
If you're from Brooklyn, there's a Brooklyn accent. If you're from the rest of New York City, which is made up of 5 counties, you have the generic New York accent. If you live out on Long Island, which is adjacent to New York, there's an accent. If you live upstate, outside of the city, again, there's an accent. And I believe even our cousins in New Jersey have a discrete, their own accent. They live down in Jersey, or the people in Brooklyn live on 33rd Street, or you hear them talking about mafia characters saying, forget about it. So we all get along with our different accents. So in answer to Steve's question, no, I don't have an accent.
I would disagree, but all right. I have a little bit of an accent too. Sometimes it's put on, and sometimes it's my natural one. Do you do any voices or anything besides your own impersonations?
No, I don't do impersonations. I'm Jewish, if Steve didn't mention that.
I have not yet.
New York does have a big Jewish population. All 4 of my grandparents were from Russia.
Wow.
In fact, in the world of Harry Potter, if everyone's familiar with that, I am a pureblood.
Okay.
I was DNA tested, and I'm 100% Eastern European Jew.
Wow.
So I don't know how often that happens on DNA, but I am. And I remember my grandmother, who came here as a 15 or 16-year-old new bride with her Jewish accent,
Wow.
and saying, Jedala, grow up, be an accountant, which I am. Be an accountant. It's good. You'll make a lot of money. And I remember dear grandma, because although she spoke English, she didn't write it or she couldn't read it. My grandfather could. But so she spoke English, she spoke Yiddish, and she spoke Russian. Yiddish is a kind of combination of German and Russian. And grandma would be speaking to us grandchildren in English, and all of a sudden she didn't know the rest of the sentence. So it came out in Yiddish. So it was kind of difficult when we were little, but after a while we started picking up what these Yiddish words meant. Yiddish, if you ever look it up, is a very colorful language. A lot of words like we take for granted, like schmuck or schlemiel, that's really, you're speaking Yiddish if you're saying these words.
Wow.
A lot of body parts also are kind of funny, like I remember the elbow was called an ugglebuggin, or if you're, I think your feet are called fisula, or hentala for the hands. And one of the things my grandmother did, because I was the youngest of the grandsons, there was one granddaughter, my sister. My name is Jerry. And in Jewish, they tend to add ALA at the end as a sign of endearment or smallness. So she would call me Jerala.
Jerala.
Yeah. I have a Hebrew name and a Yiddish name, and sometimes I got called that, but So I don't know if I don't have a Russian accent, but my grandmother did, my grandfather did. My other grandfather came here as a baby, so he just spoke as American as everybody else.
Wow, that's awesome. Hang on one second, make sure I didn't screw this up. Sometimes my autism freaks me out. So I remember to hit your button, and I was like, "Oh, make sure I turn this button back on. I didn't want to lose you." So you're from New York originally,
Right.
the Bronx.
I'm from the Bronx, and New York, in my opinion, is very sectional.
Okay.
Wherever you're from, you're generally very, very proud of. Bronxites, as we're called, are very devoted to the Bronx. And there's a saying that I learned a long time ago. You can take the boy out of the Bronx, but you can't take the Bronx out of the boy. So I'll always, and it goes for girls too in these times, obviously.
Right.
If you're from Brooklyn, you're very dedicated Brooklynite. If you're from Manhattan, you're a Manhattanite. Now, Queens, which is one of the big counties, is very interesting because it is sectional within being in Queens. There's Flushing, there's Whitestone, there's Jackson Heights, there's Elmhurst, there's East Elmhurst, and on and on and on and on.
Freddie Mercury and all that.
Yeah, and when you live in any of these little street neighborhoods, you're not from Queens. You're from Queens, but you'll say, I'm from Jackson Heights, I'm from Flushing. And I did live in Queens. The first 24 years of my life was in the Bronx. And the next 20, 25, maybe almost 30 were in Queens. So I kind of have a little bit of both. Not far from where the New York Mets play at Citi Field when I lived in Queens.
So you're a big Mets fan then, right?
No, actually a big Yankee fan. You know, if you're born in the Bronx, there's a birthright. It's not branded on you, but you have to be a Yankee fan by birth.
You have to be.
Yeah.
Now, you were just telling me that you. I just watched the movie 61. You said that you own that movie.
I do have that movie.
And it's done by
Billy Crystal.
And you were telling me a very fascinating tidbit about that movie and yourself.
Yeah. First of all, it's a fantastic movie if you haven't seen it. It's the number 61 with an asterisk above it. And what baseball did when Roger Maris broke the single-season home run record in 1961, all of baseball was against him. He was competing against a legend, Babe Ruth, who had 60 home runs in 1927.
And also a living legend at the time because Mickey Mantle was getting...
Yeah. Now, the other part of the story is Mickey Mantle, who ended up hitting 54 home runs that year. They were competitors. They were teammates, but who would break the Bambino's record of 60 home runs? And had Mantle not got injured the few times that he did, the experts think he would have been to break it, and it would have been accepted. But Roger Maris was an outsider. He wasn't a native New Yorker. He came to the Yankees in a trade with, I believe, Kansas City. And so the media was against him. A lot of the hometown fans were against him, except when his home run won a game. I remember an incident which you see in the movie. He's playing right field in Detroit, and the fans pull out a seat and throw it at him in right field. They would do anything to prevent him from hitting that 61st home run, which he ultimately did in the last game of that season. Now, in my opinion, and people have different opinions, he is still the single season home run champion.
Right.
Even though Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, and Barry Bonds have all hit more than 61 home runs, they are the steroid group. And I don't think any of them would have successfully beaten it. Roger Maris smoked 3 packs of Camels a day, went out drinking beer with Mantle and Whitey Ford and Yogi Berra and Billy Martin after all those games, and he still hit 61 home runs with all this adversity against him doing it. So he was a legend and a hero at the same time. But there is another story that goes along with 61. And again, you'll have to watch the entire movie. At the end sequence, there's a picture of a father and a son at Yankee Stadium in the first row of the box seats. And a caption comes on, and I don't remember the exact wording, but this was my first game with my dad at Yankee Stadium, May 30th, I believe, 1956. Coincidentally, when I was 8 years old in 1956, I was at that same doubleheader. It was against the Washington Senators. The Yankees won both games. I was 8 years old. And Mickey Mantle, I believe, hit a home run in each of those two games.
Wow.
Yeah. So
you got to see Mickey Mantle.
Yeah, Billy Crystal and I have some kind of bond, obviously. And I mentioned this to Steve before we went on the air. People through the years have said, I resemble Billy Crystal. Whether I do or not, that's up to you folks. But it has been said to me by several different people.
The Princess Bride would have been a lot different if you had been cast instead of Billy Crystal. I guarantee that.
Yes,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely.
All right, so let's do our first spin advertisement so we can get that out of the way. So this is what we do for advertising to get people to purchase this. This is also the way we would raise money for charities once we get fully funded. All of these corresponding spaces have a company on to them, and you will get a prize based on which one you get. So we have the Joy of Kinder, which is a German thing. That's really good. Butter of Nutter, Garage of Dance. I do this kind of fun thing, so it makes it kind of more interesting.
Right.
Table of Time, Gate of Coal, Apps of Tops of Frost, Hates You, Cupid Does, Kits of Cree, Port West of Old, Ranchero of Fierro. Go ahead and spin. I'll find out what you get.
Okay. Hates You, Cupid Does.
You get a free copy of my book.
You have a book?
I have a book. And I hid it over here. Here it is. Cupid Hates Me by Wedge Stevens. It's the true dating tells the self-proclaimed sexy ogre. That's myself. And it's all about my dating life and all the bad and horrible stories that I've done in my dating world. If you think your dating life is bad, you should read some of this.
Has this been autographed?
Not yet.
Well,
I'll sign it for you.
Because I heard your pre-program announcement about Locker Room Legends and getting authenticity on this.
Oh, I'll sign it right in front of you so you'll know it's 100%.
And speaking of authenticity, obviously I'm a big baseball fan from my days growing up in the Bronx and later in Queens. I have a baseball collection autographed. It's approximately 175 autographed baseballs.
Wow.
And I am very fussy about getting my certificates of authenticity and where they come from. I have a lot of the greats like Joe DiMaggio,
Okay.
Ted Williams, Mantle, Ernie Banks if you're a Cub fan, Stan Musial if you're a Cardinal fan, Tom Seaver if you're a Met fan, Roger Clemens, just list goes on and on. About 80% of them are Hall of Famers.
Do you have Bob Uecker?
No, I might not. But I do have Billy Crystal.
You have Billy Crystal?
Billy Crystal did autograph a baseball. I saw it on eBay, and I bid on it, and I got it, and it is authentic.
You know he played for the Yankees for one day.
I saw that
Yeah.
event. Yeah. So I've got this authentic big Yankee baseball collection, not just Yankees. We actually have in our house, our spare bedroom is what we call the Yankee room. And it's got much of my Yankee memorabilia, autographed pictures and posters and plaques throughout the room. It's been painted in the Yankee colors. It's got a blue carpet. It's got a blue couch. The light sockets, the switch to turn on the light have Yankee plates on them. We even have Yankee curtains in the room.
Wow.
And it's supposed to be my little private.
What's your favorite autograph you own?
I would have to say Mickey Mantle.
Okay.
And there's a story with Mickey Mantle. which I think I kind of mentioned to Steve, but I didn't tell him the whole story.
Well, I love to hear it.
I told Steve that my dad was my true hero growing up. When I was about 8 or 9 years old, would have been around 1956 or 57, my father had a massive heart attack, which he did survive. But back in the 50s and 60s, about the only thing they had for heart patients was nitroglycerin. They had no surgery, they had no procedures, no transplants, even blood thinners. My dad had high cholesterol,
Right.
were not as effective as they are today. And my dad was a living hero. Years after he died, people just spoke and said, "Oh, your dad, Herbie, was the gentlest, kindest, sweetest." My mother's friends, her friends, were all in love with him. And they all loved their husbands, but my father was just that kind of giving person. And he would just sit and talk to me. Whatever absurd subject I might have on my mind, he would talk to me about it. And so he was my real life hero. But my sports hero was Mickey Mantle. The first day I went to Yankee Stadium, he belts 2 home runs. Well, anyhow, it's Mother's Day weekend of 1967, and Mickey Mantle has 499 home runs. So I get a single ticket for Yankee Stadium Friday night against Baltimore. That would have been May 12th, I believe.
How much did that cost you in your term?
$1.30.
$1.30 back in
Yeah, it's
50.
about $65 for a comparable seat now.
Yeah.
In the outfield, in the upper tier.
Right.
But anyhow, I figured, well, man, Yankee Stadium, Mantle's there. He's easily going to hit his 500th home run. Well, he doesn't. The Yankees lose. I believe it was 14-0 if you check the thing. Anyhow, another day goes by. He doesn't do anything on Saturday. Sunday is Mother's Day. And my family made a big deal about Mother's Day. Grandma was there and Aunt Mary, my mother's sister. Well, the grandchildren came to Grandma's house. And I said to my mom, I am going to Yankee Stadium because Mick is going to hit the 500th home run today. So this would have been May 14th of 1967. And my mother was really upset. I don't want to use foul language. She was very upset. And she said, "Go to your stupid baseball game." And I did. And lo and behold, Mickey Mantle did hit his 500th home run. And it was, for me, it was a life event. In 67, I would have been 19. And I was just so elated. My hero had come through for me, Mickey Mantle, on the day I was there. Anyhow, I come home, Mother's Day, my mom's not talking to me, but Grandma doesn't care. Grandma wants the grandchildren and everything's fine. The next day, which would be May 15th of 67, my father has a massive heart attack and dies in my arms in our Bronx apartment. And to me, it was like a melding of my 2 heroes. The ecstatic and great feeling I had on Sunday, and then the loss of my real life hero dad the next day, less than 24 hours later. Wow. So it was a tough thing to, live through. Like I said, he and I were very close, and it was a hard loss for me. I had nightmares for years, about that 10 years. I remember he would take naps in the afternoon, and he was a snorer. And if I didn't hear him snoring, I took a little mirror and walked over to and put it to make sure that he was still breathing.
Yeah.
And I would be afraid to leave him alone in the apartment if my mother was out working or doing something else.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
sorry that happened to you. It's a tough way to lose somebody.
He was a great man, and not because I'm his son. He just
because
was.
He genuinely was a great person.
Yeah. But I know everyone's dying to find out about life in the Bronx.
I mean, I'm ready, yeah. So we were talking a little bit beforehand. And so where did you go to school at? And let's...
Okay, I grew up in the Bronx, and this is the inner city. So all you really see are apartment buildings. Generally, they're 6 to 7 stories high. Generally, there are multiple buildings in a single complex. So you'll have, for example, in mine, 2075 Wallace Avenue, 2077 Wallace, 2079, and that's just one 4-building complex. Across the street is 4 other matching buildings. The next complex is 4 more buildings. And then I believe there were another 4. So there might have been 16 buildings, 7 stories high, on my 1 square block where I lived. I went to public school at PS 105, which was right across the street. I went there from K to 6th grade.
Okay.
When I graduated, we didn't have what they call middle school. There was junior high school, which was about 8 or 9 blocks away, which is called PS 83.
And you had to walk that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. As, let's see, I would have been about 11 when I had to start doing that.
Was that a hard walk? Was that like were you ever afraid for yourself, or?
I wasn't afraid, except when I described the neighborhood a little, I was going into a more treacherous neighborhood for a Jewish boy.
Okay.
Okay, and I'll try to explain that after. And then I went to Christopher Columbus High School, which was for 4 years, 9th to 12th, which was about 3/4 of a mile from where I lived.
That's a hike.
Yeah. Now, Christopher Columbus is no longer there. When I went 1961 to 1965, it was the second best high school in the county of the Bronx.
Okay.
Only Bronx Science High School, which was a special high school that you had to take exams to qualify for, would have been better from an educational standpoint. But it was also a tough high school where you did have gangs and you had the leather jacket guys. So, it was kind of scary. You could get a good education there. But me at that time, being a 4'8" nerd, had to watch out for himself. I did have a lot of friends, don't get me wrong, who might have stood up for me. But I was telling Steve, I went there for 4 years, and I never once went to the boys' room because I was told on day one, you do not go to the boys' room if you want to survive. And somehow I must have held it in for 4 years or never had to go when I was on site at school.
That's unfathomable to me.
Yeah.
You would go 4 years without ever going into the restroom.
Yeah, I guess I would go right before I left my apartment,
right,
and then walk and just either hold it in or just somehow make it through the day. But one of the interesting stories was if I went back to 7th grade, now I said PS 83 was my middle school for 7th and 8th grade. There was this bully in the 8th grade that used to always beat me up. I would come to school, again, this little Jewish nerd,
right,
and he would, in the winter, take my hat and throw it, just like you see in the movies, or take my books that were neatly wrapped in a strap and unstrap it and throw it, or maybe take my lunch in a paper bag and throw it in the garbage can. He would just be horrible to me. Well, I moved on to the 8th grade, and he moved into the 9th grade at Christopher Columbus, the high school. Well, of course, a year later, I was now the freshman. He was the sophomore. Now, just to give you the side story before we get into the conclusion, as a freshman, I was an excellent math student. I was taking algebra, and I was perfect, 100 across the board. And a couple of seniors, some of these real gang member, leather jacket types, were not going to graduate unless they passed algebra. And my teacher, as a favor, asked me if I would tutor them. And I said, sure, I got nothing to lose. It would be during school hours.
right.
And I tutored these 2 or 3 guys. And anyhow, one day at lunch, early in the semester, this guy, I think his name was William, came up to me and started harassing me. Well, these senior guys, they did see what was happening, but it was in school time, so they couldn't do anything. After William finally left my alone and I put myself back together, they came over to me and said, Jerry, you okay? What's going on? So they said, this guy has been harassing me back in '83 and obviously now. So they said, don't worry. Well, they waited for him after school, and the next day he came to school. You could not recognize him.
Wow.
He had one eye closed, an arm in a cast, and it just looked horrible. And he actually came up to me and apologized for at least 2 years of harassment, and we kind of became friends after that.
Really?
Yeah. So, yeah, it was quite surprising that he did take that step. But like I said, it was an interesting school. It was a good quality school. I do not want to be racist at all, but it was mostly a white school at that time. This is early 1960s. It's before the Civil Rights Act. It's before they started really integrating the schools throughout the country, as well as New York, which was never really considered a segregation state. But yet the blacks lived in certain areas, the Hispanics lived in certain areas. So if you weren't in the district, you couldn't go to Columbus or one of the other better high schools. Right. That changed as years went by, where Columbus actually became a delinquency school well after me. And then it became a charter school. And then I think in the last 5 or 6 years, it got shut down completely.
Now, I'm oblivious to what does a delinquency and a charter school mean? I don't know what that means.
Well, a delinquency school to me would be where there were more bad kids than good kids.
Okay.
More troubled kids than honor students. More gang things going on than education. I think it was in junior high, but I know of at least one time when I was in a shop class and one of my classmates pulled a knife on one of the teachers. Some of the bigger guys in the class wrestled him to the ground to save the shop teacher.
Wow.
I remember an incident, because I was saying about neighborhoods and tough schools. When I went to the middle school or junior high, which is a tougher neighborhood than my own, I remember my 7th grade teacher getting very annoyed at some misbehaving gang students, and they actually took him to the window. We were on the 5th floor and threatened to push him out while the rest of the class sat there with our mouths open, nobody knowing what to do.
They threatened to throw the teacher out?
From the 5th floor. 3 or 4 guys had him.
Wow.
And fortunately, level heads prevailed. This was about probably the middle of the semester, maybe December or January, right before the Christmas break, if I kind of remember. And when we came back from Christmas break, we had a different teacher. I don't want to mention the teacher's name.
No,
I do know it.
It's fine.
But they lowered him to like a 3rd or 4th grade teacher after that. Well, most of us were in the same class in 8th grade. I think what they were doing is they kind of kept the troublemakers together rather than splitting them up. And with the 8th grade, we had our homeroom teacher, who was a lady. Maybe that's too nice a word for her. She was a mean lady, a spinster type lady. Okay. And I think they got under her skin to the point that they actually gave her a nervous breakdown. And she was hospitalized and didn't finish the semester either.
Wow.
So when I say that was a tough school in a tough neighborhood, it really was. My neighborhood, which was called Pelham Parkway, for lack of a better description, was in those days, the 50s and 60s, mostly white, and you were either Jewish, Irish, or Italian. You very rarely saw a black person in the neighborhood, And that's because of just the way New York City is. It's very neighborhood oriented. It was very race oriented.
So you had fights between like the Italians and the Irish, or
Well,
was it kind of that
the
segregation
gangs
too? Or-
maybe, but what I learned about growing up in New York, and I tell you a lot about it, the Irish people, the Jewish people, and the Italian people, I don't mean to leave any other races out or anything,
no.
are all very family oriented.
Right.
They're all strong families. And back in the 50s and 60s, when religion and getting away from God was not so much an issue, you had a lot of faith there. There were 3 or 4 Jewish temples in walking distance of my apartment.
Wow.
There were 5 or 6 churches nearby. There were both Catholic churches and Christian churches. Both the Irish and Italians seemed to be more Catholic, but there were nevertheless Christian churches as well as pure Catholic, like St. Mary's and St. this and St. that. So the 3 races seemed to get along well.
Okay.
There would be gang wars and there would be gang trouble. I was invited to a gang war by a close friend of mine, I think in 9th or 10th grade.
Wow.
But that's still little Jerry the nerd with a pocket protector saving so my shirts didn't get pen and pencil on it. But I said, his name was Vinny. I said, Vinny, thank you, but I'm hanging out with my friends. Another story with that protection group that I mentioned with that guy, William. Well, being Jewish, again, in a Jewish neighborhood, when we had the High Holy Days, the High Holy Days just recently occurred, to anyone who's aware, Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Those are the highest days in the Jewish calendar. One signifies the New Year, and the other, the Day of Atonement.
Okay.
Where, and again, I don't want to be too religious. If people accept Jesus as their Savior, all their sins are forgiven. It's like a life commitment.
Right.
In Judaism, we have this one day a year called Yom Kippur, where you go to temple and you kind of ask for forgiveness for all your trespasses for the previous year. So it's like it's a 1 year get out of jail free.
Okay.
So the question is, well, what if you commit a sin the next day? I don't want to get into it, but it's just a difference in Christianity and Judaism. Well, anyhow, being nice Jewish boys, and all my friends were Jewish, at least the neighborhood crowd, we're all in our suits and ties, and we went to temple in the morning, and then it was a beautiful autumn afternoon, and we took a stroll, not realizing that we left the Jewish neighborhood, and we were now in the Italian neighborhood. And again, I was a nerd. My friends were nerds. Some of them were taller than me, but we were nerds. We were good boys.
Right.
Anyhow, before we know it, we're surrounded by 5 or 6 or 7 leather jackets. And they were looking to mess up these 5 little Jewish boys or 6 little Jewish boys. And all of a sudden, they kind of part, and the leader comes forward. And it's the guy I'm tutoring at the high school. And he says to me, "What are you doing here? You crazy? These guys will tear you apart." So he says to his friends, "Hey, this is Jerry. He's good by me. You know,
leave him be.
Let's just escort them back to
Where they need
their
to be."
side of the tracks." And everything was okay. We lived to fight another day without fighting. One of the beautiful things about growing up in the Bronx, we were what was known as street kids. Now, many of you people listening, older people, you have kids and you can't get them out of their bedrooms. They either got their computers or their cell phones, or even when they are out, they're walking with their phones or they're talking on their headsets. Well, street kids did everything in the street. It's not a bad inference. It's not like we lived on the street or we were dirty.
Right.
But our whole lives outside of school revolved about being in the streets. We played a million different games. I wish I had a couple of hours to describe all of them to you. There was a game of Ringalivio which was a hide and seek type game where
Okay.
you capture prisoners. We would go to the schoolyard and we would play stickball, which is my favorite game ever. We would play punch ball, slap ball, touch football, basketball, softball, all depending on the season. Obviously, there was box baseball, there was off the stoop. And one of the beautiful things is it wasn't like the 12-year-olds did this and the 9-year-olds did this. Everybody was together. My sister, who was 6 years younger, she might be part of the tail end of the group, or John's brother, Bob, who may be a little older, may still be. So when we had choose-up games, as they called it, you had a wide variety of ages all playing together. And we grew up with street sense. My grandmother in Yiddish called it sekala. It's brains. We knew how to live in the streets. We knew how to be safe in the streets. Everything today is about taking care of the children. And I remember us drinking on a hot day. We'd open a fire hydrant and put our heads down and drink water in the hot summer. Or I remember going on swings and monkey bars made out of metal with just concrete on the floor.
Right.
We didn't have any of these safety things.
Right.
Or kids standing on the swings as they went almost over the bar. This is what you had to do to keep up with the Joneses, to prove your manhood or your bravery at that time. As far as sports, I was a big sports nut, not a big basketball fan, but football, baseball, a little ice hockey. And people wonder how we played it because we didn't have grass. We were
Right.
on cement. Well, we played baseball, mostly softball, on cement with sliding. And, parents didn't appreciate it. They always had to get new sneakers and new jeans. We played touch tackle football, if you're familiar with that, with no equipment, on cement.
Starts
And-
off as touch, and next thing you know, you're touching.
Yeah,
is
well, the difference
dragging
between
around.
touch football and touch tackle, touch football, all you can do is touch the guy with the two hands and the play is dead.
Right.
In touch tackle, you're allowed to block. And that's when the game gets a little fierce, when you're trying to knock your best friend down because he didn't get picked on your team. But, again, we were street kids. You went down, your jeans got torn, your knee was bleeding. You put your hand on it and you got right back on the field and played. I mean, sliding in baseball on cement was an adventure, and yet we amused ourselves season in and season out. In the dead of winter, it could be single degrees and we'd be playing touch football. We'd be down to our T-shirts because you're building up our own body heat from playing in such cold weather. And it was just great. And the thing about it that personally is important to me, we were very poor. As I told you, my father was a sickly man most of my life.
Right.
And my mom didn't work. In those days, moms didn't work. They took care of the house and took care of the children, and they loved doing it. They were never career women. And but we didn't know we were poor. My mom and dad did without things so that Ellie, my sister, and I had clothes, books for school, a nice home. And if they needed something, we didn't know. They might go to my grandparents. They might go to my aunt and uncle who had more money. We never had a car. My dad was too sick to drive, and we were too poor to own one. I was envious of my other friends because they all had a car, but I didn't hold it against my dad or our being poor. And, now I look and I own 4 cars. My wife owns them with me. I don't
Right.
want to.
No, yeah.
But I never dreamed in my wildest dreams that I'd ever own 4 cars at the same time.
Wow.
So
How life has changed for you.
Yep. And it's not because I'm wealthy. I've got a good job. I've worked hard at it. I love it. I still do it. I was telling Steve I should be in my office now doing extended tax returns. But Steve and I have been planning this, podcast for quite a while.
We have.
and I wanted to take advantage of Steve's availability, and I needed a break. Steve said earlier, I am recovering from COVID, so this is something a little more relaxing than, doing some boring tax returns. For me, and we haven't touched on it, the transition from being a New Yorker, I know we're going to talk more about New York,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
to becoming a Vinton, Iowan of 5,000 people versus 8 million people would normally be quite a transition.
Yes.
For me, it wasn't. I fell in love with Iowa my first visit.
Really?
I had met, and people don't know, I met my wife online, Karen. I had been married before, and if there's time, we might get to those stories.
You are one of the few people that I can know have successfully online dated then.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, Karen and I did meet online. We met in a chat room. It was, I believe, June 29th of 1999. I'm an accountant, so I remember statistics.
so we're talking like the old AOL chat room days.
Yeah,
not
AOL
like
chat room.
online dating like it is today.
It was I think it was a non-sectarian room. Being Jewish, I always frequent the Jewish chat rooms because they always say, oh, marry a Jewish girl, it's better for you. Don't believe it. Anyhow, but I did meet Karen in a chat room. And for about a month, if you remember the old AOL, if one of your buddies was online, you saw their name, you could click on their name and instantly be chatting back and forth. And we chatted for about a month like that until Karen, being, I guess, the more aggressor of the two of us, said, I'd really like to talk to you. Can you give me your phone number? And I said to myself, why not? And I think almost as quick as I typed in the 10 digits with the area, my phone rang.
Wow.
Karen must.
She was eager.
She was eager. And Steve knows her. So anyhow, we began a telephone relationship. And a lot of times online couples, especially with a long distance between them, rush to meet each other. And that's sometimes where they go wrong. Karen and I did not meet. This was now the beginning of August of 1999. We did not physically meet until Easter Sunday of 2000.
Okay.
So we had a good 8-9 months learning about each other, talking to each other on the phone. And then it finally became, we want to see each other. So I thought the better option would be to meet in a neutral city in case things didn't go well.
Right.
So we both flew into Chicago for Easter Sunday weekend. And I can only say it was magical. It was a short weekend. It was maybe 3 days together, maybe not even 3 full days. And she went back to Iowa and I went back to New York. I guess our relationship intensified a little more until I said, Karen, I want you to come to New York. And I believe it was June of 2000. She came to New York and I gave her the whirlwind tour. In a week, she saw more than most people would see in 3 weeks. If you want to sign up for one of these Jerry tours, I have taken many friends and family out here in Iowa to New York on these sojourns or whatever you call them, and everybody's come back raving about New York. Nevertheless, our relationship continued long distance, and around September of 2000, it was nearing Karen's birthday, which is next week, by the way.
Happy birthday, Karen.
Yeah, so I came out here and fell in love with Iowa. Just everything about it was just so great, and I love it to death. I still have my New York roots. I always will, and I could talk about some of the great things about New York after we finish this part of it. And the relationship continued. I remember we spent the weekend in Cincinnati. Why Cincinnati? It was a place that both planes went. And we spent most of the time in Kentucky. We went to Fort Knox. We went to Louisville. Eventually, Karen made another trip to New York. I made another trip to Iowa. I had a falling out with my other family, which maybe we'll get time to talk
We
to.
need to talk about that. Yeah.
And then we got engaged in September of 2001, and we got married in October of 2002. And an interesting thing happened along the way. I'm 17 plus years older than Karen. Yes, I robbed the cradle this time. And I did have a child from my first marriage, which maybe we'll be talking about in a little while. And there was also a boy that my ex-wife had from another man who turned out to be a real loser, the father. And I ended up raising her son, not officially as an adoption,
Right.
but I raised him as well. So that's what I mean by my other family. But anyhow, getting back to Karen. Well, she had never had children, and the old biological was ticking, and she wanted a baby very badly. And I'm looking at my age, 54 at that time, roughly, saying, I'm ready to be a grandfather, start with children again. But I loved her, and we tried, and she had a miscarriage and was heartbroken, as well as I was. I've seen at 54, I could still do it, But anyhow, we started talking about an international adoption, and we both really got into it. But lo and behold, she got pregnant again. Oh. And again, we were really ecstatic, but we said, this time we're not going to spread the word until it's really, really, really confirmed that there's a baby there, And unfortunately, she lost the second baby. So we went guns blazing into the adoption. One of my clients back in New York knew people who knew people. They set us up with an agency in Connecticut and a orphanage in Guatemala City. And within about 4 or 5 months, they actually had a placement for us. A little 2-month-old girl by the name of Angela. And they sent us pictures online. And of course, we both fell in love with the pictures. And then we began a process. And it took us from the pre-adoption phase to bringing Angela home, I believe 16 or 17 months.
Wow.
Which was a very, very strenuous ordeal on both of us, because we flew down to Guatemala in January of 2005 when Angela was just 6 months. And we got to see her and have her privately. We didn't have to stay at the orphanage. And of course, we fell in love with this little baby. And the process was just dragging and dragging and dragging. And I'll tell you more about that after. We went back in April, which Angela would have been 9-month-old. And still, this time we got to see her a little longer because we planned a longer trip. Well, now it's July of 2005. Angela's going to turn 1. So we wanted to be there for her first birthday. We wanted pictures of her with us at her first birthday. So again, we made a trip to Guatemala, and we spent the week with her. And now we were really getting attached to her, and she was getting attached to us. When the people from the orphanage brought her to us, you could see the recognition in her face. She literally jumped out of their arms. Well, after that visit, it really became frustrating. Without going into the detail of the process at the Guatemala end, they have the final signature phase. And this is after the mother, the birth mother, has had 4 opportunities to rescind the adoption. At all these different phases, she could pull the plug. Fortunately, this mother didn't. And our case was put on the top of the desk of the person who would sign off and make it official.
Right.
And just when the Ahrenstein file got on top, must have been 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the guy left for his vacation. So he didn't come back for 2 or 3 weeks. And we kept calling our sponsor here in the States. What's going on? We were on top of the pile. He said, this is Guatemala. So He gets back to his office, must have been the end of September already of 2005. And he signs off on our papers. And I'm not sure which event happened first. I'm going to mention two events. There's a chickenpox epidemic at the orphanage. So they had to shut down adoptions out of that orphanage until every single child was clean.
Right.
Angela did have chickenpox during that period. So let's say 2 or 3 more weeks go by, and now we're biting our fingers over this thing. Well, just when we think everything is good, there was a massive earthquake in Guatemala. They shut down the government, and everything was rescue efforts for several weeks. Until we got the final word near the end of October that you can come down and this will be your final trip. But the thing is, you had to book an open-end trip. Just because you were going down November 1st, you did not know the date that you would be able to take her home.
Right.
So we booked a tentative return date of November 17th, which would have put us in Guatemala 2.5 weeks. We picked November 17th because that was my dad's birthday.
Okay.
And we felt maybe that'd be a good luck charm. And, I told you my dad was gone a long time. Anyhow, it took the better part of 2 weeks. And I think on the 15th, we were notified the adoption is, and we had to go to the embassy and get paperwork. And it's a lot more than I'm telling. But anyhow, as soon as we knew she was ours, we went to American Airlines and changed our tickets to fly out the next day instead of waiting an extra day. Now, one of the great things in the adoption process that we did, because we made multiple visits, Angela was legally a citizen when she touched ground in America.
Nice.
People, unless they've changed the law, who go on a single visit and bring the child home, the child is not a citizen. They have to go through the citizen process here in the States. But I guess because we showed that we're coming down there 4 times, that we really wanted this kid, we didn't have to do that. And a couple weeks later, we got this beautiful certificate that Angela's a U.S. citizen. Now, people ask us, did Angela speak Spanish when we got her? And the answer is no. She didn't speak at all. English is the only language that she's ever known. There's no accent like I was accused of having, but don't. And
no, it's me that has the accent. That's right.
And part of the things that we observed at the orphanage is that there's a lot of kids and only a few people to take care of them. And these women just do not have time to talk to the children between, feeding them and dressing them and cleaning them and bathing them. There's no communication. So we did get Angela. She was 16 months old. We flew home on November the 16th. Now here is the exciting part. In the middle of the adoption, in April or May of that year, of 2005, Karen got pregnant. And this pregnancy was viable. And 6 weeks after we got Angela home, my son Jesse was born.
Nice.
So it was like having twins 6 weeks apart in age. Well, actually, 18 months apart in age. But here we have a brand new adopted baby, 16 months old, and now we have a newborn all of a sudden, 6 weeks later.
So that went from being just the two of you to
Almost
both
like twins.
hands full.
Like
Yeah.
twins, 18 months apart in age.
So what advice would you give someone who's looking into adoption? Like, what are some of the things that you wish someone would have told you about it?
Okay, we consider ourselves very lucky. A lot of people have mentioned to us, why don't you adopt domestically? There are so many needy children in this country. And we didn't not consider that, but we considered the reality of it. we heard a lot of horror stories about domestic adoptions. And again, I don't like to be political about these things, but there's a lot of liberal thinking judges who believe that the best place for a child is with the birth mother. Even if that birth mother has been through drug treatment and has abused the child, and just all horrible stories that we heard. And then you have this wonderful adoptive family, not necessarily the Ahrensteins, raising this child with all the love in the world. And then the mother comes before the judge and she's clean. And they take this baby away from the only parents it ever knew. And we heard those stories over and over again. And I mentioned this to one of my clients who did have a contact of a contact. And we researched Guatemala as an adoptive country. We actually considered adopting from Russia. The problem with Russia was there's a lot of bad adoptions. There's a lot of switch and bait, whatever
Right.
they do. This is the kid you're getting. And then when you go there, oh, something happened, but we have this kid who has emotional problems and I don't mean to sound naughty,
yeah.
physical handicap.
Once you've been told this is what's going to happen, and then the situation changes.
Yeah.
You're not. Yeah. I see.
Yeah, so, then you go there and you see a handicapped child in a wheelchair, and you were thinking you were going to get this nice, healthy child. We considered Russia because of my ethnicity, having 4 Russian grandparents. But when we learned about Russian adoptions, we scratched it. We also considered China. China, we know that they want to get rid of girls. And we wanted a little girl. We didn't know we were getting a boy yet, Jesse.
Right.
But we wanted a little girl. And China, they're a dime a dozen because they don't want to contribute to the population problem.
Right.
But again, the stuff in our research was that you had to spend weeks at a time there. And again, you didn't know what you were getting, given the Chinese culture. So we went ahead with Guatemala. We had strong references from these people that were referred to us, and that's why we picked Guatemala.
Okay.
Even though, maybe someone in Iowa would have been Caucasian instead of Latino or something. But it doesn't matter. She's as much our child as Jessie is.
She is a wonderful human being too.
Yeah, Steve knows her. He's
Yeah,
danced
we
with her.
Danced, yeah, that's how we know each other. Daddy-daughter dance.
Steve's
for 10
niece
years.
and I and
Yep.
my daughter, we've danced in daddy-daughter for several years.
Yeah. You guys are a wonderful family, which
Thank
is
you.
why when this all came to fruition, you were one of the first people I wanted to talk to. We've always gotten along. And one thing that I love about you is you are one of the most caring and humble people I've ever met.
Thank you.
So,
I appreciate that.
No, it's true. Very true.
Yeah.
So, hey, let's spin the wheel again and we'll get into our next segment here.
And which one is it? Butter of mutton.
Oh, butter of butter. This is fun. I just put that on the board today, actually.
Oh, cool.
Now, I tell people I will not promote products I do not use myself. Now, I personally, I love Nutter Butters. These are the double stuffed Nutter Butters. They just came out. They're called the Double Nutties. A member of my family, my dog, really, really loves them. In fact, that's how she takes her medication. Is if it's not in the double stuffed Nutter Butter, she won't take it.
Wow, that's cool.
So these are fantastic. They're twice as thick as the normal Nutter Butters are. You get more peanut butter. These are, if you love Nutter Butters, you're really gonna love these. I promise. I eat these all the time. So
Yeah,
obviously
thank you.
that's how I got this.
Thank
But
you.
there you go.
Appreciate that.
All right, so there's a couple areas that I really want to talk to you about, but you just touched on it that you had kind of a traumatic loss on the other side of your family with your daughter and all of that. We talked a little bit about that. Are you okay talking about some of that?
Yeah, I'll try to highlight it because
Sure, no.
I could spend hours on what happened.
You know, we've already been talking for an hour and 8 minutes.
Yeah.
That's crazy. This time's flying by.
Okay. Anyhow, I did have another family. I did get married when I was, probably about 24. When I was 24. The girl was a bit younger. And I had met her up in the Catskill Mountains, which is a resort area in New York. And she was a bit younger, but not the 17 years that I had with Karen. She's about 5.5 years younger. And we got married in, got to get the right year, 1992. It's 1972. I'm all mixed up. 2 families, 4
You're
kids.
good. No worries.
Anyhow, we had a baby girl, Holly, 2 years later. And, marriages do go sour. What can I tell you? And we got divorced 2 years later in, I believe it was June of 1976. And after the initial bitterness that divorced couples go through, we kind of made up. And eventually we actually became best friends. And I was kind of not the perfect father, but I decided I'm going to dedicate my life to raising my daughter. Even though I wasn't living with my ex-wife, I would always be there for her and take her on weekends and take her on trips when I had her and everything. But I remained close with my ex-wife. And as the years went by, so what I was trying to say is I did not date between 1976 and meeting my current wife, Karen,
Really?
in 1990. I knew some girls, but my daughter was my priority.
Okay.
Okay, so with 20-something years, 23 years, before I said, you know what, I'm older now, my daughter's grown, I can go online and try to meet somebody. But in between all of that, my ex-wife got involved with another gentleman. I shouldn't call him a gentleman. But anyhow, they had a son together. They were never married. And he turned out to be a drug addict and a alcohol boozer and everything. And she threw him out when her son, Ryan, was about 6 or 7. And me being this, person who's easily taken advantage of, was there. And I was close to the boy because I knew him for 7 years,
Right.
having always been there. And I took it upon myself to raise him. I never adopted him, but we were kind of a family, Jill and Holly and Ryan and me, but we weren't married.
Right.
And through the next 15, 20 years, my ex-wife would be dating different men and having relationships. And I was just there for the kids, taking them places. Went to California, went to Florida. We went to on a cruise or something. We went all over the place. And so now it's 1999. And, I'm feeling that I need someone in my life other than my children. And in 1999, Holly would have been 25 already, and Ryan would have been about 19.
Okay.
So they're not babies. And I met Karen in a chat room, as we talked about earlier. And I said to the kids in New York, I'd like you to meet her. And we arranged it to go out to dinner at the Outback in Bayside, Queens, New York. And we went there. Karen and I were there first. And they show up, Holly and Ryan. And it was like an episode of Good Cop, Bad Cop. Now, I know that their mother put a lot of bad thoughts and a lot of bad ideas in their head, because some of the things that they said at the meeting, at the dinner, were right out of her mouth. And I knew it because I knew her for 20-something years. Right. Anyhow, we're sitting trying to eat the meal, and Holly is playing the good cop. And she's trying to say, Dad, you always had hopes of retiring down to Florida, and now you'll be out in Iowa in the middle of nowhere. And what else did she say? I'm really concerned because if you move out there with your fiance, you won't be able to love us anymore. You won't be, there's no way you can love us if you're 1,000 miles away. And I kind of looked at her cross-eyed, if I could cross my eyes, and say, what are you talking about? This is a 21st century. You can love people and be there in 2 hours. It's a 2-3 hour flight to New York. I could still be a part of your life. And she kept saying these things in a very gentle tone. But then the bad cop showed up, Ryan, who was very aggressive. And again, everybody knows that I'm Jewish. Obviously, I mentioned that earlier a few times. And he said, first of all, that woman is going to change you into a Christian. Well, truth be told, it's 20 some odd years later. She hasn't succeeded in that. Not that she wouldn't like to, and not that I wouldn't even consider it. But I am still very proud of my Jewish heritage. I respect her Christianity. We go to church. I don't even know if there's a Jewish temple in Cedar Rapids, but we go to church fairly regularly. I love the pastor. I love the congregation. It's a great experience, a learning curve for me. Growing up, as a Jew, and now learning it from the other side of the Bible.
Right.
So it's a great experience. And he was just with the banging on the table and just, it got to the point where they stormed out of the restaurant, leaving me with the check. But I would have paid the check anyhow. Gotta add a little levity to this. Anyhow, this was a visit of Karen's that she came to New York. We weren't married yet. And she was flying back a few days later, and she did. Well, out of habit, I always went to pick up Holly and Ryan. Even though they were young adults, we would do things together on the weekend. And I go there Friday night to do this, the week after this incident. And I walk in, and my ex-wife jumps down my throat as if she had been at this meal and as if my kids had told her everything but from the reverse. Karen was the aggressor. Karen was cursing them. Karen was loud to them. And I swear, as God is my witness, Karen just sat there as a lady, talking like I am now. Yes, her fingernails were in my thigh. I had marks for weeks.
Wow.
Just holding herself back, being the lady. And when Holly and Ryan saw that Mom was jumping down my throat, they chimed in. Oh, yeah, she did this and she said that. And it was not true. I'm not just protecting Karen. I was there. I saw what happened. And it came that they finally said to me, you have a choice to make. And the choice was this. I could have the three of them in my life, or I could have my girlfriend. And much to their surprise, I said, well, I'm going to take my girlfriend. And why that's a surprise to everybody listening is I'm a cupcake. And when screws are put to me, generally I give in. And they knew it. They're going to give me an ultimatum, and I'm going to. I know her a couple of months. I know them for years. And how could I pick Karen? And I must have shocked the hell out of them because that was it. And I walked away from them, and which probably leads to another story, which I told Steve. It was an estranged relationship with my daughter, and about, I'd say 12 years later, right after Father's Day, I got a phone call in Iowa from someone who said, hi, this is Holly. And I told Steve this story. I said, Holly who? And I happen to know 2 or 3 other Hollies out here in Iowa. And she said, this is Holly, your daughter. And she was very gentle. And I think this was after I had my triple bypass, which she had found out about, and said, I hope you're feeling good and all of that. We didn't mention that, but I did.
Didn't know that.
But I did. Well, so maybe we could touch on that after. And I'd like to see you if you still come to New York. And we arranged a supper and went to a steakhouse, I believe. I must like steak every time I go to New York. And the funny thing, and let me just throw in aside, Karen and I and my kids, and remember where I was in the story, go to New York and we dine in the finest steakhouses in New York. And guess what they're serving? Iowa beef. We go 1,100 miles to get the best steaks in New York, and they're right here at home. Unfortunately, and I'm not putting down the steakhouses here, just the technique that these places make
yeah.
the steaks and age them for 30 days or something. So again, we're at a steakhouse, and she's trying to catch up and talk a little bit about about Angela and Jesse. And, she's got a sister, she's got a brother and everything. And then she starts to tell me her problems. And Karen and I, before I made the trip, knew that she was going to hit me up for some money. And we decided beforehand that if she hits me up for money.
She had a set amount that was set up. Yeah.
And I felt it was worthy.
Right.
That I would give her this amount. And just to let everybody know, we agreed on $5,000. And I figured I hadn't seen her in over 10 years. And easily I would have spent $500 a year on her birthday, on Christmas, on holidays, taking her out to eat. So we're at the supper, and she's starting to explain to me she owes money on her credit cards, and she lost her driver's license, and now she's got to pay to get it back, and something with her car insurance was canceled, and she's in a spot. And I'm in my head saying, well, a couple $1,000 maybe. She said, so I said to her, Holly, cut to the chase. What do you need? Well, truth be told, she asked me for $40,000. Yes, you're all dropping dead and falling out of your seats.
Wow.
I almost did that at the table. And I said, what? I said, there's no way. First of all, I'm raising 2 kids. I have 2 mortgages. I have 2 car loans. I make a good living, but I'm not the wealthiest man in the world. I had heart surgery. I got to make sure we have money in case, God forbid, something happens. Right. Karen could take care of things and everything. There's no way I can do it. Do you know she had the nerve to say, well, can you do $35,000?
So all of a sudden it turns into a negotiation.
Oh. Well, I kept shaking the head no. Well, how about 30? And how about 25? And at that point, I just said, listen, first of all, I do not make any financial decisions without Karen. And Karen is the same way with me, at least on big ticket items. And I have to discuss this with her before I agree to anything. And $20,000 is way above any consideration. But I will speak to her, and I will get back to you. This was on a Friday night, if memory serves me properly. And I said, I will call you sometime next week after I've figured everything out. And I took her home to where she was living. And Monday afternoon, I just got home from work. My phone rings, and she says to me, have I got an idea for you? I said, really? She said, how about you, meaning me, borrow $40,000. I know you have a lot of credit and a lot of credit cards and great credit line, and give me the $40,000. I'll pay off all my debts, and then you'll be my bank. I will pay you every month. And I don't know the look on my face, what it was, but it must have been, what the F are you thinking? You can't pay your own $40,000 back over time. You're going to pay me? And I said, it's not happening. And she said, well, did you speak to your wife? I don't know if she gave her the respect of Karen. And I said, yes, I did. And we will give you $5,000. And I said to her, she said to me, well, can I come over and get it? And I said, well, I still got to go to the bank. I got to withdraw it. I'm here on business. You could pick it up on Friday. And sure enough, Friday she came to, at that time, we still had our New York apartment. And she came over, and I actually made out a check to her. And she kind of disappeared off the face of the earth again. So I knew that was kind of bad money. But I stressed to her, and I remember this very clearly. I said, you have scraped the bottom of the barrel. Karen and I have no more excess money that we can give you, period. Okay? This is it. Well, about 2.5 months later, I got a phone call. I need $3,000. After the pleasantries, obviously.
Right.
And I said, really? What do you need it for? Well, she was still living with her mother, my ex, and her brother. And apparently, Ryan had had some kind of accident, not life-threatening, but he did have an accident, and he couldn't work. And they were past due on their rent. And they were going to get evicted if they didn't have $3,000 yesterday. That's how urgent it was. And I said to them, I don't have it. I said to Holly, I had given you the $5,000 that I did have. I told you that that's all there was, and I can't help you. And of course, she began bawling and crying. They're going to be thrown in the street. And I'm sure it wasn't that the situation. I'm sure I wasn't being told the truth.
Right. You felt like you were being manipulated.
Yeah. And she was crying and crying, and eventually she hung up on me. And so that was that episode. And about 2 or 3 months later, I get a call, which this would have been sometime in 2015, because she passed in 2016. It would have been in 2015, maybe sometime in the fall. And she calls me. And by this time, she had spoken to Angela and Jesse on the phone. So they started to forge a relationship, whether it was real or just a way of getting at me. Oh, I have a brother, I have a sister, I don't know. But anyhow, she does the pleasantries. And then she says to me, by the way, I'm pregnant. Now, most dads probably would jump up and down for joy. It would have been my first grandchild, obviously. And I didn't. I took it with a grain of salt and said, oh, really? Is there a father? Being Jewish, that's the first question you ask.
Right.
Maybe not being Jewish, you ask it. And she said, yeah, there's a father, but I'm not with him anymore. Turned out to be a real jerk. And I'm just repeating what she said. He was an abuser.
Right.
And but she has a boyfriend now. And the boyfriend has volunteered to take care of everything. So right away, I kind of get suspicious again. And so now she's going to need money because, now this is where it gets really exciting. She has decided that New York has gotten toxic. Those were her words. And she has a plan, to much to my surprise. She's going to move out to Las Vegas, get an apartment, get a job, be pregnant at the same time, and start a new life. And everybody knows that's going to take money. And who is First National Jerry Bank going to give money to? So, the conversation went kind of back and forth. And part of me was kind of convinced that maybe she's going to get away from her mother's bootstrap and maybe try to do something on her own. But there's a lot of questions.
Right.
Why would you, in the middle or somewhere in your pregnancy, all of a sudden go to a strange place? I spoke to my wife, Karen, about this. There were several phone calls. And she said, you know what? That's wrong, Jerry. Let her come to Iowa. We have an extra bedroom. I'll get her a job. We have a whole battery of doctors that we know. Karen's in the medical field. We have 2 or 3 RNs in the family. And Vinton is just that type of community.
Right.
We'd get her a job. We have an extra car. And she'd have family to take care of her. But that wasn't good enough. She wanted to do this on her own to show the world. And again, I melted, but I did not melt without Karen's consent and agreement. She said, she's your daughter, and we can't throw her to the wolves. So we gave her some more money. And I would hear from her every once in a while. She might call Angela on the phone or text her on their devices. And I would guess it might have been sometime around November. I'm picking, I got to get the kids right, Angela and Jesse up at school or something. And the phone rings, it's 3:30, and it says Holly Ahrenstein on it. I said, this can't be good. And I reluctantly pick up the phone, and it's her. And she said, well, I made it to Vegas, but the apartment that I took was a dump, infested with insects and other stuff. And the job that I was planning didn't work out. And now I have to find another apartment, put a security deposit down, and get furniture. And I said, Holly, I'd love to help you, but I can't. And you know, folks, whether or not I could or not doesn't matter.
Right. No.
I had been run through the ringer each and every time, and I don't know what was truth anymore. You know? And I said, by the way, it's Friday afternoon at 3:30. Where am I going to get $1,500, whatever the number was? She said, don't they have Western Union out there? So she had already investigated what my questions were probably going to be. And I said, what I've said on all the other times, I cannot do this without speaking to Karen. So I go to Karen, I pick up the kids up from school, and I said, guess who called me? She said, Holly. And she wants more money. And I told her this scenario. And she said there is a Western Union at Regions Bank, I think, here in Vinton.
Right.
And I went there. It was just before closing time. And we were able to do a wire transfer. She gave me the address at the other end with the number, I think. And I sent her the money. Now, this is, like I said, November. About a month goes by, and I hope I'm not boring anybody with this story.
You're good.
But Karen and I and the children are in Minneapolis, actually in St. Paul, at the St. Paul Hotel. We have tickets for a Broadway show at the Ordway. And we're going to spend a vacation weekend in December before Christmas up there. And my cell phone rings. It's Saturday afternoon, and it's Holly. And Karen says to me, aren't you going to answer your phone? And I said, no, it's not going to be good if I do. And so I don't. But the phone rings again and again and again. And she says to me, well, you better answer your phone. Maybe it's an emergency. Oh, by the way, sometime along all of this, she called me and said she had a miscarriage, which maybe or maybe she was never pregnant,
Right.
just working on my sympathies. So she said to me, Vegas has not worked out at all. She wants to go back to New York, and she needs $400 or $500 right away. And how is she going back to New York? She's going to take like a Greyhound bus or something.
Right.
And while I'm talking, Karen's going on her laptop or her cell phone. It's cheaper to fly back to New York from Vegas than to take the bus. Why doesn't she do that? Meanwhile, I'm talking to Holly. I say, look, we're on vacation this weekend. I have no access to a bank or anything before Monday. And she said, but you will send me the money, won't you? And I said, we'll talk on Monday because we were going to get home Sunday night late. And your train of thought. Okay. So she said, oh, by the ways always scare me. Especially, even if Karen says, by the way, or my children say, by the way. It's the worst three words in the English language together, anyhow.
I thought it was, we need to talk.
I think this was, by the way. Now, as I said, I had an apartment in New York in Queens, which we still in 2015, 2016, we still had. We gave it up at the end of 2016 or during the summer. But anyhow, when I go back to New York, I have no place to stay. And I was just wondering if I could use your apartment. And I said, no. Karen had worked years to clean up a bachelor pad that she moved into in 2002 when we got married, into a respectable 2-bedroom apartment with new furniture, new carpeting, new everything. She turned that apartment upside down. And Holly, God rest her soul, was the biggest slob. She was a smoker. And I could only imagine what she would have done to that apartment had I agreed to it. I said, what's wrong with your mother and your brother? You know, they're closer to you than I am at this point. And again, she gave me a lot of excuses why she
Right.
can't. And she said to me, "You'd rather I live in the street?" And I said, "Your mother and brother would rather you live in the street? You know, why am I put to a greater scrutiny than they are?" But she hung up very angry. She never called me that Monday to get the money. And time rolled on. And now we're in 2016. I believe memory serves me, it was March or April. My cell phone rings. It's a Saturday morning. And it's not Holly. It's my ex-wife. Haven't seen or spoken to her since 2001. And she says to me, "Holly's in the hospital in Las Vegas. And she's very sick. And we have no money for prescriptions. We don't have any insurance. They're going to send her home. We're not sure what's wrong with her, but she's having trouble moving her legs and all sorts of issues." And I said, "What do you want me to do? You threw me out of your life, or she threw me out of her life, and I've given her all these thousands of dollars over the last 2 years, and it's just one thing after another." And I said, I'm not sending you a dime. And again, my wife, who this girl treated like shit, oh, excuse me,
You're good.
and said to me, "You can't leave her like that. Let's send her at least a couple of $100 for the prescriptions." So we did. We arranged Western Union again. We sent it to wherever my ex-wife was staying at that time. And that was it. And I said, "I hope Holly feels better." I don't know what else to say, but I'm certainly not coming out to Las Vegas and spending thousands of dollars to rectify the situation. Well, now it's, I believe, the middle of May of 2016, and I get the phone call from Jill, my ex again. "Holly's dying." Not telling me what's really wrong with her,
Right.
but she's dying. And when I say, "What's wrong with her?" she says, "Does it matter?" And it turns out she had cancer all over down here. And maybe that's why she got the false pregnancy. She thought she was pregnant or something.
Right.
So
I mean, in fairness, though, for people who may be like, "Well, this is, why didn't he believe it?" And I mean, you've been taken through this. Like, I mean, I've been in that situation where people are just asking and asking and asking, and you're
and
like,
nothing back. No,
Right.
nothing in
It's
return.
not- it's not
I'm not
like it
talking to
was-
pay me back the money. In fact, one of those borrowings, she swore that boyfriend was going to send me a check. He was waiting for his commission check.
Right.
So we know what that
Well,
was.
I mean, it's hard to believe someone when you've been lied to as many times as you've been lied to, and it's hard to take someone at their word when they keep breaking it,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So anyhow, over the course of that day, there were several calls back and forth, and ultimately I got the call again that Holly died. And was I shaken? I was shaken. The only memories that I have of Holly really is when she was a little girl, into her teens when I was still a part of her life, maybe even to young adult when I was still a part of her life. What happened in those estranged years is not part of my life. So did I react like a typical father, hysterical, crying? No, I can't say I did, because that part of my life was just cut out. But now another issue developed. Here they are, Jill and Holly's body in Las Vegas. Who's going to make the funeral? And how are we going to get Holly back to New York? And I said, well, if I'm going to undertake the funeral, it's going to be the way I want it. I'll pick out the casket. I'll make the arrangements. There's a cemetery where my parents are buried, and most of the Ahrenstein relatives are there. And of course, there's a family where Jill's family is buried. But if I'm paying for it, she's going to be where I want to bury her. I'll pick out the casket. I'll arrange the funeral and everything. Well, she got very incensed by that. Like she should have some say in this when I'm going to pay for it. And she said, well, some nasty words and hung up the phone. and I told Steve this story earlier. My former sister-in-law, her brother's wife, calls me, and when I saw her name on the ringer, kind of got nervous. But it turns out that the three of them put my brother-in-law, Jonathan, through a bigger ringer than me. Thousands and thousands of dollars with no repayment. Just I maybe $20,000-$30,000 to bail them out. And the one time that Jonathan and his wife needed them, they weren't there for them. And they both swore them off. But Carol said to me, Jerry, it's still your daughter. It's still our niece. We have to get her buried. Jonathan and I have talked, and we are willing to split the cost of the funeral with you. For every nickel we spend, it's going to be half you and half me. And I said, God bless you, Carol. You know, I'll split it with you. And Carol just took the bull by the horn. She made the arrangements. And don't forget, we had to fly the body back to New York, right, and arrange everything at the New York end. And it was very time consuming. And she made it happen. And the funeral was, I guess, like the Hatfields and the McCoys, because nobody was talking to anybody. Of course, Jonathan and his wife confronted me on a friendly basis, obviously. Several of my childhood friends who still live in New York showed up, but otherwise it was a hostile funeral. Now, at Jewish funerals, a rabbi presides, just like a priest or a minister would at a non-Jewish service. And I think it was Jonathan or someone else said, oh, that's the rabbi who's going to do the service. And I went over to the rabbi and introduced myself as Holly's father. And he said, wow, the mother didn't even tell me that there was a father alive. So that's where my ex was coming with this. We got through the funeral, and as sad as it was, you know, my friends were there for me, and that's what mattered, you know. Now, I don't know how many Jewish people we have out there, but the next phase of this, in the Jewish tradition, usually within a year of the death of someone, you erect a monument. The process is called an unveiling. And a stone is erected on the grave, and they put a veil over it, hence the name unveiling. You hire a rabbi to come there. You invite family and friends that are close to the decedent. And the rabbi blesses the stone, and you have that camaraderie and fellowship, and you kind of remember. And in the Jewish faith, that period ends the official mourning period. You don't really ever stop mourning if you really love the person, right, but that's the official end of it when you erect the stone. Now, normally it's done within the first year. Now, because of all the craziness in this relationship and this whole saga that I've given you, I didn't want to overstep my bounds and suggest the unveiling. I figured I would let my ex-wife approach me as she would have and said, hey, Jerry, it's time to make an unveiling for my daughter. Probably would have said my daughter, not our daughter. But she didn't. And now it's in year 2. And it's getting close to the 2-year anniversary. And I say, I don't know what to do. So I actually called Carol and Jonathan and said, do you think it's all right if I do an unveiling? And they, because I'm not talking to Jill and them, they thought it would be a great idea. The problem was I called the cemetery, and because Carol had arranged the funeral, the documents had her name on it. Okay. So she could not authorize I could not authorize the unveiling. So Carol would call the cemetery, giving them my name as the next of kin, and that I had their authority to do it. And long story short, we arranged it. I bought a beautiful headstone for her, And then we arranged to have the close people, my friends and Jonathan and Carol, and there's another brother-in-law with a niece and everything. And but my quandary was, should I tell Jill and Ryan? I mean, they spurned the whole thing. They were, like zombies at the funeral, and not because they were mourning, because they were being like that. But a little bird told me it's still the right thing to do. She's still the mother. He's still the brother. And so rather than call her, she received an invitation, just like all the other invited guests. You kind of do that with an unveiling. You can mention it to people and they could show up at the cemetery, but it's a little more formal. And then after that, I arranged a luncheon at a nice Jewish delicatessen where Jewish people like to go. And everybody there, I think, was Jewish anyhow. So we had the unveiling. One of my young nephews, who just had become a rabbi, was living in Long Island. So he performed the service for us. And he actually knew Holly when Holly was a little girl, when Holly was a young girl. And he did a beautiful service. And after the service, again, it was very cold, like the funeral. Most of the people knew each other and were okay. And I told everybody we're having a luncheon. I gave them the restaurant and the address and everything. And then I looked at Jill and Ryan and I said, Jill, Ryan, you're part of this gathering. You are invited to share in the fellowship with us. I don't remember my exact words.
Right.
And you're welcome to come. I didn't want her to think because of everything else that she's not part of it. And she just, shrugged her shoulders. Well, my daughter Angela told me that she overheard Ryan, that's Holly's brother, saying, hey, Mom, let's go. And Jill said, absolutely not. We're not going. Now, another one of the guests was this girl, Debbie. Debbie and I knew each other before Jill knew Debbie. But it was Debbie in the summer of 1969 that kind of made the blind date for Jill and I to get together. So we both kind of knew her. I knew her longer. Debbie had to end her friendship with Jill for the same reasons everybody else had to end the relationship. I think in the last year, I had spoken to Debbie just on other things, and we were talking about the unveiling. And Debbie said to me, you know what Jill said to me at the unveiling? That Jerry did this just as a circus to show what a great person he is, and not because he cared or loved Holly. So that is the saga of my New York family. I don't have any living New York family anymore. I have cousins in Florida and Boston and out in the West Coast, but that's the story with that.
That's like I said to you earlier, like I lost contact with some of my kids, and I couldn't imagine losing a child. I couldn't imagine what that's like, but I definitely know that feeling of loss. And
yeah, it was hard. I can't even say I cried at any time after she died. Right. I might have felt misty-eyed and everything, but I didn't have that feeling. Truth be told, I don't think I cried at my mother's funeral. When my dad died, and I mentioned to you, right, I cried for days, for weeks. He was a young man. He was my hero. And I just had all this emotion. He was 51 years old. My mom, God bless her, lived to be almost 86.
Wow.
And died after a short illness with cancer. We thought it could go on, but fortunate for her, she had a heart attack, and God took her quickly, and she didn't suffer that much. And I was sad, but I looked back and said, my mom had a decent life, right, and my dad was cut short. So I don't know. Maybe I used up all my emotion on my dad.
I think that when you go through that first, I noticed that myself, the first real trauma you feel really, really emotional about it. And as things happen, as you get older, maybe you develop a callus or a scar to it that,
Yeah, I mean,
you
it's
just
not that you
don't.
want it to happen, but
Right. No, you're not wishing ill upon anyone or celebrating the ill of anyone. And it's not that you're not sad or you just found a different way of dealing with it. So
yeah.
we're going to get into something else that's kind of sad in a second. Go ahead and spin the wheel one last time and let's move
Okay.
on.
And it's pie of
Pie of
shark.
shark. Oh, boy, oh, boy.
Is this a good one?
Well, your line of work it is once I find it. What did I do with them? People that can't see this off screen, I've got a whole treasure trove of stuff. Where did they go? You are.
Ah.
So, you being an accountant, you need a good pen, yeah?
Yes.
Sharpies are my new favorite pen. They have these S-Gel pens. I used to be a huge Pilot fan. The G2s.
Right.
They are amazing pens. These are smoother, cleaner. They're so much. I love these pens so much. So if you need a good pen, you're looking for, like me being a writer, I write a lot.
Yep.
Sharpie S-Gels. These are absolutely fantastic. Make sure those are going home with you.
Okay, thank you.
So, yeah. All right. So, native New Yorker, lived there for a long time. 2000, you said 1999 you met your now wife. You said that did you get engaged in September? Is that what you said?
September of 2001.
Something major happens in September of 2001.
Yes.
What was it like being a New Yorker
On September 11th.
on September 11th? How did that change New York a little bit?
Okay. I guess we need a little background about New York.
Okay.
Okay. And I may have talked about it earlier when I was talking about the different sectionalism in
Right.
New York. Well, New York has a bad rap. And I think I kind of mentioned that before, maybe. I know I mentioned it to Steve. People think, oh, New York, oh, I'm not going to go to New York. It's horrible there. The people are mean. They're nasty. They don't put their arm out to help a stranger or a tourist or anything. That's the furthest thing from the truth. New York, like any city, has its bad people and it has its good people. But New Yorkers are the strongest people I've ever seen in the world when there's a catastrophe. And 9/11 was a catastrophe in spades. Okay. Now, just an aside, I actually teach 9/11 at Tilford Elementary to the 4th grade.
Wow.
And I've been doing it for several years now, except for the pandemic year. And I work with these 10-year-olds, 4th graders, and they eat it up alive. They want to know why this happened and how these terrorists, and I explain to them what terrorism is. And all my classes are interactive. I want these kids to be part of the class.
Right.
And the questions that come to their mind when a 10-year-old says to me, how could these people do that knowing they're going to die? And I have to explain that to them. Or what did the people in the towers who were above the plane lines, what was going through their minds knowing that there's no way out? And people jump. Why would they jump out the window? They're not going to live anyhow. Maybe it was a quicker death. I don't have the answer for them with that. But, to see the look on their faces and the horror, and these are 10-year-olds. They're very astute. They've got the questions. They want to know why this happened and how this happened. Now, we as adults, we kind of have an inkling why it happened. We had our guard down, number one.
Right.
Number two, the airlines were not secure or as secure as they are today. There were lapses. And, Why did they attack the Twin Towers and not the Empire State Building? Why didn't they knock down the UN? They had a specific agenda because financial center is the symbol of America, of capitalism.
Right.
So they knew what they were going to do. And I could tell you other things about 9/11 after we talk about New York's reaction to 9/11. When this tragedy hit, New York became one. Didn't matter what color you were. Didn't matter how wealthy you were. It didn't matter how old you are. We became New Yorkers as one people. Just by the sheer numbers of New Yorkers in downtown New York who, in the face of this danger, could have ran, and I was one of them, but I was 4 or 5 miles away, you know, and everything. But I'm talking about the people who were down there and said, there are Americans, there are New Yorkers trapped there, and maybe they need my help. And maybe if I was a block away or 2 blocks away, and my instinct would have been different than safely in Midtown Manhattan and not in downtown New York. But there was this bonding. And I'm not just talking the first responders. Those people were obligated by the jobs they undertook to give their lives. But other people they saw what was going on and they were there. And just to take it another step further, and I teach this in the class, over 3,000 people died that day. Never forget the people that died at the Pentagon. This is not only the towers.
Right.
And never forget the 90 people or so who went down in Pennsylvania. They are heroes. They prevented that plane maybe from taking out the Congress. Today it wouldn't be the worst thing. But taking out that, or maybe the White House. Nobody knows for sure where that 4th plane was, but we know it was headed for something major. So, I stress the importance of all the disasters on that day were equal. But what a lot of people have forgotten, since 9/11/2001, over 10,000 people have been diagnosed with cancer, one form of another, all somehow involved in the cleanup or the rescue. And the last statistic that I read, over 3,000 of those people have perished.
Wow.
And what about the thousands of American boys and women that went to Afghanistan to track down the perpetrators of this disaster? So this disaster is a lot bigger than the 3,000 victims, each and every one a hero. Over and above that, it's 2 more times that at least, and possibly 6,000 or 7,000 people who may have forms of cancer now from the debris, from the smoke, from the asbestos, from the fuel. Right. So this disaster is even bigger than we imagine. But getting back to the New York end of it, from my perspective, where I was safe. They shut down New York City. What I mean by that is they stopped the buses. New York depends on public transportation. You cannot deal with 8 million or 9 million people without that. They shut down the subways, the commuter railroads. No vehicles were left into New York unless they were emergency vehicles, police, fire, even sanitation for cleanup, emergency rescue, military. Those were the only vehicles that were being allowed in New York. The scariest thing was walking home that day because I had to walk. My walk was about 7 or 8 miles from my office to my apartment in Queens. Every time we heard a plane overhead, nobody knew for sure because nobody knew how many planes were still up there. We knew 3 or 4 had come down. What I believe I read, there were 4,000 planes flying over the United States when the people in charge of the air, whatever that agency is, they radioed each and every plane to come down to the nearest airport. you can imagine what chaos that was, just flying on a friendly day,
Right.
bringing down planes all over the country. And no planes were reported missing, is my understanding, which means that it was limited to those 4 planes. But nevertheless, New Yorkers were walking home and they saw a plane up above. It was probably a military jet, because I believe the New York airports may have been shut except for emergency landings.
Right.
So, but it was scary, but it was friendly. And I was telling Steve examples before of an elderly person walking, maybe with a cane or a walker, and younger people going up to assist them by holding their arm or walking with them. Maybe a person carrying packages, and a New Yorker coming up and taking the package without running away with it. Seriously trying to help people. Manhattan Island is an island, and it is surrounded by bridges that take you to the Bronx, Queens, Brooklyn, and even Staten Island, which are the outer counties of New York. So the only way to get off Manhattan Island is to cross a bridge. And when we got to the world famous 59th Street Bridge, which connects Manhattan and Queens, and I say that's world famous because anybody that saw Spider-Man and the tram crossing, that's the bridge that I had to walk across. These big semis and even smaller trucks were stopping at the Manhattan end, opening up their backs and telling people, just jump in the back. I'm going to take you across the bridge to safety. It was just amazing to see the thousands of people, and that's an understatement of the people, exiting that city in order. No pushing, no shoving, no, I got to be the first one out. My life is more important than your life. It was a sea of humanity with a common goal, their preservation of everybody and to get everybody out. And that was the attitude and everything that went on for days and days and weeks after 9/11 in New York. And Mayor Giuliani was an amazing man at that point. I mean, he had a lot of political enemies. He was supposed to be going out of office in November. The majority of the people wanted him to stay on with a legal extension. But the powers that be, Bloomberg, who had won the election, nope, I'm going to take over. I'm going to clean up the city. But they called him America's mayor. And he was. And George Bush, like him or hate him, and I've been on both sides of the coin with George Bush, he was there for New York. And he was there for our military and for the American people. And I'm not being political about Giuliani or him. They were the kind of leaders we needed. And for me, it was a life experience. My other life experience is being Woodstock. I was part of the original crowd.
Were you? You were at
In
Woodstock?
'69, yep. I was another life experience.
What was that like?
Are we finished with 9/11?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just like I said, everybody out there, remember all the planes, remember all the people that have died since then, and remember the people who are dying because they gave their lives to, save other people and clean up that mess. Woodstock, 1969, an amazing year. The Mets won the World Series, New Yorkers. The Jets won the Super Bowl, and I think the New York Knicks won the next NBA championship. Only the Yankees lost out. But anyhow, man landed on the moon that summer. It was an amazing year. And here we have, in a little town of Bethel, New York, this massive rock festival, the largest in the world had seen up until that time, and how that got out of hand. Now, let me just tell you about Bethel. Bethel is a small community. I'm trying to think of a small community out here.
Well, we have Garrison, which is 500
It's probably more like Garrison.
Yeah, 500 people.
Very rural and located in the Catskill Mountains. And a man by the name of Yasker, I think that was his name, had a small farm. And that's what it literally was. You were sitting, there's a famous picture of the masses sitting on this farm. It looks like a cul-de-sac. And I'm in that picture. I could show you where I was sitting. There's 700,000 other people, but I could tell you where I was sitting. But anyhow, they never expected that kind of crowd. They had sold tickets for it, and people had bought tickets. Myself and my friends that made it there didn't buy tickets. But we were lucky. In New York, in the 60s, the Catskill Mountains was a resort community. And people would spend the summers up there, usually the mothers and the children. The fathers would commute back and forth on weekends, and you would stay either at these elaborate hotels or these things called bungalow colonies. A bungalow is a single unit, like a cottage, and families would rent it, only it was in like a commune environment. There might have been 50 or 60 or 70, and you spent the summer together with these people. They had facilities for swimming, for sports. They had a weekend nightclub for activities, for bingo, for the kids. They had day camps. Everything was there. So I was up there that summer. I think I was working, but I came up on weekends. And in anticipation of this particular weekend in August of '69, I came up like 2 days early. And I got together with all the young adults and teenagers from the community. We put together, is it 21 or 24 people into the 3 cars that we had. We had 3 cars, and we got 21 people in them. Okay? I had a big Mercury Monterey, pretty big car. I think I got 9 people in my car alone.
Wow.
One of the guys had a Dodge Charger. He probably got 8 or 9. I forgot what the other guy had. But anyhow, what had happened with the masses going up to upstate New York, they had closed for the first time in history the New York Thruway. There was traffic coming from all ends of New York. They couldn't accommodate the number of vehicles. We were lucky. We were already in the Catskills. We were about 12, 13 miles away.
Okay.
And we got up early in the morning and taking the dirt and gravel roads, we came from the back roads and we got to the Woodstock site. Now, here's a road. It's Route 17B, I believe, like in Baby. There are cars parked all along the side and cars parked all along the side. And Woodstock is here on Yasker's farm. We had no place to park our 3 cars. Well, we double park our cars. There were guys and girls. The guys get out of the car. We see a small car. We lift up a Volkswagen. We move it to the side. And it got 12, 13 guys. We drive down into the ravine, park our 3 cars, like kind of a ravine. And then we pick up the Volkswagen and we put it back where we found it. We had our parking spots. We went there. I think they expected maybe 250,000 people. I think they had anywhere up to 700 to 750,000 people. There was a lot of rain the first day and the third day. And people were just drenched in mud. We were sitting on blankets. We had to throw our clothes out when we got home. There was food. There was medical facilities. I know there was a lot of drugs going around. They were
so drugs at Woodstock?
They were announcing it on the stage between acts. I remember somebody saying with that hippie accent, "Yeah, man, be real careful of the blue stuff. We've gotten reports that that's really flipping people out." And this is the way the guy's talking in front of 700,000 people of what's going on, at Woodstock. Now, I understand, amazingly, there wasn't a single death. I do not believe there was a single overdose. I thought I had heard a rumor that a baby was born there. I cannot confirm that. It was just, like I said, an amazing, amazing experience. And this is a personal story on it. I have a cousin, Donald. He's a year younger than me. 1969, I would have been 21. Donald would have been 20. We had not seen each other since our bar mitzvahs, which probably would have been 13. I think 13 and 20, you grow a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I was walking around to get refreshments, and I bumped into my cousin Donnie. He was living up in Massachusetts, and we were in New York. One of my closest aunts and uncles were his parents. And out of the blue, we're both walking toward a concession stand. Jerry, Donnie, out of 700,000 people. Just amazing to see him there. I mean, the music was great. I can't say I liked every single group that I heard.
Right.
I remember Joan Baez performing. I remember Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young. Richie Havens, maybe. Country Joe and the Fish. We didn't stay for the entire event because when we went back, we had to lift that Volkswagen and drive the 3 cars out. I will tell you that I saw license plates from every state in the Union,
Wow.
including Alaska and Hawaii. I don't know how the Hawaii car got there, but and probably all the Canadian provinces.
Wow.
And maybe even Mexico. But I remember when we were walking, because we had to walk several miles to get to the farm from where we parked. Oh, there's Oregon, there's Florida, there's South Dakota, there's Nevada. It was just amazing. Amazing being there.
Oh, I couldn't imagine.
Yeah.
The only thing that I've had anything similar to that was, I'm about to nerd out here. I got to go to WrestleMania 32. Only reason I went is because my grandfather, who was late in life, lived an hour away from there. And so I basically made it 2 birds, 1 stone. Like, I'll go see my grandfather. And since I'm there, I might as well go to WrestleMania.
I think we went to one. When I say we, it's me and the other 2 children, Holly and Ryan. I think we went to one at Madison Square Garden.
A WrestleMania?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Madison Square Garden, they call it the world's most famous arena.
Oh, yeah. Probably is.
It goes back to the end of the 1800s, and it's not the original. I think it's the 4th Madison Square Garden.
Wow.
I had the privilege of attending over 900 New York Ranger games there. I had season tickets for the Rangers.
I have never made it to an NHL game yet. I'm a Colorado Avalanche fan. Joe Sakic is my dude, and I've never been to a live hockey game.
Yeah, I had season tickets for many, 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 many seasons, and I had a tremendous streak going of having not missed a game. And when I talk about not missing a game, sometimes it was at a family function. Once it was for a family funeral. And once it was for a very important work commitment. If there was a New York Ranger game going on at Madison Square Garden and I had a ticket, I was there. I had a streak of over 600 consecutive games.
Wow.
Including preseason, regular season, and postseason playoff games.
Been to a Stanley Cup game?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Many. But anyhow, the 3 of us, and I mean Holly and Ryan, the early 2 kids, we had 3 season tickets. And we had to take the Long Island Railroad from Queens to Madison Square Garden, which meant going under the tunnel, under the river, that takes us to the garden. And it was, it was a March game or something against Pittsburgh. And it started to rain and rain and rain and rain. And by the time we got to the tunnel and we had entered the tunnel had got flooded on the other end. And we couldn't make it into Manhattan. And we were on that train for hours just sitting until they cleared, because they had to turn the power off, until they cleared the tunnel so that we could not go to Manhattan, but go back. That was the first game I missed after all, because of a rainstorm. I missed funerals. I missed parties. I missed the high holy days. I missed Passover Seders. Because
So you were an avid diehard. Who's your favorite Ranger?
Eddie Jockman, goaltender.
All right.
Yeah, that's the jersey that I have, number 1 on it. Retired Hall of Famer. I have, besides my baseball collection, I have a collection of about 20, 25 autographed hockey pucks, mostly New York Rangers, mostly Hall of Famers, but I have several pucks of Wayne Gretzky, and I have Phil Esposito, one of the all-time greats, and of course, several of the Rangers. But I would like to tell you a story about one of my baseballs,
You tell me about your baseballs.
as long as everyone doesn't mind at home.
I mean, they don't have a choice.
Okay. Everybody asks me, well, you got a lot of baseballs there. Did you ever get a Jackie Robinson? And I said no, 2 reasons. Number one, he died fairly early in life. He retired fairly early in life. And most of the baseballs that are being autographed today are a more recent craze of retired players getting paid for autographing ball after ball after ball.
Right.
Well, anyhow, I got the next best thing. I was searching online and I saw a baseball signed by a player, and I'm willing to stake $1 on it that nobody out there has ever, I'm not a gambler, has never heard of this baseball player. I'll mention it to Steve. Johnny Cucks, Kucks.
No, Bobby Cox.
Their relation. No. That's Cox. Anyhow, Johnny Cucks was a young pitcher for the Yankees. I think he came up around 1954. He retired maybe around 1960. And he was never a great pitcher. I think his career was like 60 wins and 59 losses. Certainly not Hall of Fame material.
Right.
1956, the Yankees won the American League Championship. The then Brooklyn Dodgers won the National League Championship. The two are playing in the World Series, and it goes to Game 7. Game 7 is at Ebbets Field in Brooklyn. That's where the Dodgers played before they moved out to Los Angeles. Well, Casey Stengel, everybody's heard of him, the manager of the Yankees, decides to pitch Johnny Cucks in that 7th and deciding game. Now, the kid had a phenomenal season. I think he was 19-6, which is an incredible season for a young pitcher. Now he's put center stage, 7th game of the World Series on the road. He's not even pitching at Yankee Stadium. Well, he shuts out the Brooklyn Dodgers. I believe it was 9-0. You could check that and criticize me on it, but I know he pitches a complete game shutout, something pitchers hardly do today.
Right.
What's amazing about the game, as great a game as he pitched, I think he gave up 2 or 3 hits, did not strike out a single batter.
Wow.
The last batter of the game is Jackie Robinson. And he strikes out Jackie Robinson. Story doesn't end there. After that game, Jackie Robinson retires from baseball. Johnny Cucks on his baseball. Johnny Cucks, last pitcher to face Jackie Robinson.
It's a cool story.
Almost as good as having a Jackie Robinson baseball.
Sometimes, in some ways, even better. Because, I mean, no one knows who he is. I mean, it's...
Yeah. Now, I remember when I was bidding on a Joe DiMaggio. Again, everybody, I'm sure, heard of Joe DiMaggio. And Jesse...
Joe who?
Joe. You know Joe DiMaggio. Anyhow, I was getting the baseball on eBay, and I was following the auction as it wound down. I knew what I wanted to spend on the baseball and not a nickel more. And hey, Jewish people are known for being cheap. I had my price, and my price happened to be $250. That's what I was willing to spend. My son Jesse is sitting on my lap. he couldn't have been more than 2 or 3, watching me watch this auction. And it's getting down to the last couple of minutes, and somebody is in at 2:45 or something. And if you time it just right and you get that last bid in and it expires, you're the winner.
Right.
And I'm watching it, the clock, and you got the clock showing you how much time is left. And I'm just about to hit 250 dot. And I hit 250, and Jesse hits my hand, and I put another 0 dot. And next thing I know, I bid $2,500.
Oh, no.
And I took Jesse and I flung him off my lap, not thinking, and screamed. And of course, Karen comes running in saying, "What happened?" Because of him, I got paid $2,500 for a baseball. And she's, calm down, calm down. There's a way out of it. You can take back your bid within a reasonable time, and then the next highest bidder has the option of buying it. So, of course, we go online right away, and she does the magic, and I'm off the hook. But the other thing is you can't rebid on that item. So that if nobody won the auction and he relists it, you can't bid on it again.
Right.
So
You did get a DiMaggio ball.
later on, I got another one for my price.
There you go.
But, yeah. So.
I just recently acquired a Hank Aaron signed 715th home run poster that has the still shot of him hitting it, still shot of him rounding second with the 2 fans running in, the pitcher's head down in disgust, and then the last one that just has him crossing home plate.
Yeah, well, to me, he's still the lifetime home run champion. For the same reason, same reason Roger Maris is the single season champion.
Hey, why is New York pizza considered so delicious?
It just is. I don't know if now pizza's supposed to be an Italian treat. Mm-hmm. And during the mass immigration of the 1800s and the 1900s, Italians flooded New York, and I think they brought with them maybe the best recipes. New York pizza is out of this world. We have this one place in Queens County, right near Citi Field, near Shea Stadium where it is, called Amore, Amore. It is the best pizza we have ever tasted anywhere in the world. It's a small place, maybe like that. It's got a couple tables in the back, and it's got a bar that you could just stand by. And they serve it by the slice. People in New York, they're not obsessed by buying whole pies. You can go into a pizzeria and order a slice, order 2 slices, and, of course, whatever toppings you want if you want it. But it is just the best pizza.
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, and it's almost anywhere you go to New York. And I think it's the greasier the place looks, the better the pizza is. And it's a place where they still throw it up, and maybe it falls on the floor and they step on it and a roach goes in it and gives it the flavor. I don't know. I don't know. But it's natural. I mean, I remember growing up in the 50s when a slice of pizza was 15 cents. So I remember hanging out. There was this pizza place that we hung out on Friday night, and a couple of stores up was Carvel, which was an ice cream franchise. And our mothers would give us, let's say, $1, because that was a lot of money in the 50s and 60s. And we'd go to Gloria's Pizzeria. We'd get 2 slices and a beverage, have it at the pizzeria, walk a couple stores over, go into Carvel, get a sundae or a shake or a big ice cream cone. We had change from our $1.
Oh.
Then I remember, if anyone's ever seen the movie The Rocky Horror Show, where they sing that song, Science Fiction Double Feature.
Right.
Well, I lived that. In my area in the Bronx, Pelham Parkway, we had a theater called the Pelham. And on Saturday afternoons, for the young people, the young kids, they had 2 science fiction movies. And if my mom gave me $1.50, I saw these 2 classic 50s or 60s sci-fi flicks, had enough for a drink, popcorn, a candy of my choice, and probably chocolate bonbons. All for that price.
Right. It's a good deal.
And that was after Friday night hanging out at the pizzeria and the ice cream place.
My friend, we're getting close to the end of our time.
All
We
right.
have a few more things we have to take care of.
Oh,
just
you
because
did bring up pizza.
I did bring a pizza. Oh, but I was going to ask you.
The other best food in New York is not the steaks from Iowa, but bagels. The Jewish people,
Really?
I know I'm being racist, make the
You're
best
not
bagels.
being racist.
Well, people would accuse me of that. What about Bruegger's bagels?
People don't
or-
understand. See, that's the thing. People misuse that term.
Well, that's it. I think it's the most overused word in
Yeah,
English
it's
language.
not one-
But Jewish people have always made the best bagels in the world. And you'll notice this is true because the second best place for bagels is South Florida, where all the Jews moved to. When they retired, they took that craft and they have these bagel shops in South Florida, just like they do back in New York.
Yeah. What's your favorite pizza place here in Iowa?
The one that comes the closest to New York pizza, in my opinion, is Needs in downtown Cedar
Okay.
Rapids. There was another place we went. I know we went to Zoe's. I don't like the Chicago style pizza. It's a New York, Chicago thing.
I mean, I'm the exact opposite. I go to Zoe's just for the Chicago style.
Yeah, okay. But there was another place we went that it was very good, but I still got to give it to Needs.
Okay.
I don't necessarily like the way they slice it.
Because they do the party cut.
Yeah, I'm used to the triangle.
Right.
And the big question is why do they put a round pizza sliced in triangles in a square box?
I don't know.
Teaching people geometry.
How do you feel about Casey's?
I like Casey's. I do not like Pizza Ranch.
Yeah.
I am not a fan of Pizza Hut.
And Pizza Hut's become... See, when I was growing up, Pizza Hut was kind of... I mean, I never lived in New York, but when I lived all over the world, though, Pizza Hut was kind of the standard. They've turned into the McDonald's of pizzas.
Right.
Like, it's just...
Yeah.
They seem like they're just cutting corners left and right, and it's not what it used to be.
Yeah. But other than that, New York is a great city. If I didn't say it's the greatest city in the world. What I do miss about New York, being an Iowan now, because I don't travel. I used to travel maybe 25 trips a year for business. And I haven't been back there since March 12th of 2020 when the pandemic hit. They were going to shut down New York. And I was there on business. And a friend of mine called me and said, Jerry, you better leave town or you're not getting home. So I changed my flight and flew home and haven't been back.
Wow.
But it's a great sports town. I miss my Yankees, my Rangers, my Jets, my New York teams. Entertainment, you cannot beat Broadway.
I spent 12 hours in New York in a layover in the bus station. And I went outside because it was right by...
You're right by Times Square,
Yeah,
42nd
Times Square.
Street.
I was actually going to say that, and it didn't sound right. Yes, you're exactly right. And I walked out, and I looked this way, and things seemed okay. And I looked over here, and there was this two guys fighting, and one guy was getting ready to stab the other one. I turned around, went back into the bus terminal, and said, "There's no way."
Yeah, I mean,
No way.
Mayor Lindsay used to call New York City Fun City. And it is. I've seen, I mean, I know we have limited time, but everyone's heard of the New York subways. And you can go in there and see anything, entertainment, naked people, these people who pretend they have handicaps and they beg. And you got to wonder about them when somebody's walking through the car with maybe blinders on because they can't see and a cane, and they never miss a pole, and they're wearing $250 sneakers and they're begging for nickels and dimes. You got to wonder.
We
about
got a
them.
bad. Iowa has got a bad, panhandling issue too.
Yeah, well, I remember one guy in New York in Times Square sitting on a cardboard box, panhandling, had his sign right here, "I will buy drink, beer, and drugs with your money." And I was saying, now that's a guy I could give money to because he's not lying to me
He's
what
being
he's going to
honest
do with
about
the
it.
money.
This is what's going to happen. You give me money, I'm going to go
And he had a box full of coins.
All right. Do you want your prize now, or do you want to do it off screen? It's kind of a cool deal.
I don't care, whatever works for you.
All right. Well, I'm hesitant because I don't want people to beat me up over this.
People are going to beat you up over
Oh,
it?
always, yeah. Because people who come on after you are going to be like, I want something cool like that too. So I know. Oh, wait. Do you do a scholarship? Don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
We have time? I could.
Yeah, you can talk about it. Go ahead. This is part of the reason why this happened.
Okay. About 15 or 16 years ago, when I was fairly new to Iowa, a cousin of my wife, Karen, Paige Davis, I don't hesitate to mention her
Oh my
name.
God.
I adored her.
Wait. She was your cousin?
Through marriage. It's Karen's cousin. It's Missy's granddaughter.
Yeah. I'll tell you why that rings.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Anyhow, we kind of have a connection with this because Crystal is best friends with the sister of the young girl.
So Paige was, in a lot of ways, to me, a young sister for a long time because Holly and Crystal were inseparable.
Yeah. So
Paige
we kind of
worked
have a connection with this.
Yeah.
But anyhow, in the short time I had been coming out to Iowa, I got very, very close with Paige. I loved her dearly. We took her on a trip to New York one summer. I took her upstate New York, the city of New York. And she was actually the first babysitter for my children, Angela and Jesse. And I adored her. And unfortunately, for reasons unknown, she took her own life. I had seen her 2 days before. She was at my house. She came downstairs into my office and was talking to me about colleges in New York that she might want to attend. And, loving her like I did, I was open to help her and everything. And I went back to New York on business. And the next morning, her father, Mike Davis, calls me in a panic. My daughter is dead. And I canceled all my plans. I flew right back to Iowa to be here for the funeral. Like I said, I had gotten very close to Paige and the Davis family. And it might have been a week or 2 or 3 weeks. She died in January of 2007. See, the statistics are always there. I remember I had a dream. And the dream was that we gave a scholarship at the graduating ceremony for Vinton-Schellsburg High School in Paige's name. And I mentioned it to Karen the next day, and she said, if you had a dream, we've got to make it happen. So I called the school, and they said, oh, they'd love anything like that. And, of course, we called Missy and Mike, the parents, make sure that they were on board with it. And we did it. And we did it for a second year. And the third year was very interesting because that would have been Paige's high school graduation. And that year, Melissa and Mike donated an extra $500. Karen and I were paying the first $500. And we gave 2 scholarships on behalf of Paige. Well, about a year later, one of my clients who has a private foundation in New York, I told him the story. And he said, Jerry, if you set up a small private foundation of your own, you could then approach the public legally as a foundation, raise money, and maybe give more scholarships. And he said, and you know what? I'll be the first one to contribute $1,000 a year, 2 scholarships, plus my $500. We're already at 3 scholarships. Well, we did it. And over the last 12 years, we've gone from 1 and 3 scholarships to this year where we broke a record of 15 scholarships.
Wow.
Now, my money, our money, is all private money. We get no government money, nothing. It's all from friends of mine, clients of mine, people who live in Vinton and know about our program. People can contribute to us through PayPal. They could send us checks. We do have a page on Facebook. It's the Ahrenstein Family Charitable Fund. Each year we're trying to raise more and more money and give more and more scholarships. And it's been a blessing. I get to go on stage, and it's not just me picking the winners. By the way, we have a committee of 5 people: myself, my wife, one of my brother-in-laws, and 2 other people who have no connection with Vinton. So when they look at the applications, it's purely objective. The others 3, we have a little insight into family needs, and we make the final decisions. So that is one of my blessings being out here in Vinton. And I'm also proud to be the president of Act 1 of Benton County that puts on stage productions for the tri-community area. And please, if you see us in advertisements, come out. Live theater is the best thing.
It's funny how connected we are without even knowing about it. I mean, I didn't know about the Page connection. I was part of the last play that Michael Mudro did. Yeah. So with Act 1, before he tragically died. So it's crazy. Small town living and all that. We actually have to close up shop, Peter. So I'm going to give this to you off the camera, but okay. I will tell you this, that Locker Room Legends has a big hand in this, and I want to give them a very big shout out. They are, like I said, Dan's a great person, great individual.
And we have shopped there.
Have you?
I've gotten several things there.
Yeah, he's tremendously great, and he, like I said, he will not sell it to you if he cannot confirm that it's genuine and authentic. So everything you purchase from there, please know that you are spending a little bit more, but you're buying that peace of mind and that security. Again, why buy good when you can buy legendary? So we are actually pressing the up against the time. We got to run. Thank you guys very much. Oh, wait. We got to do the gratitude moment. We have our always say thank you at the very end. I tell people you can say, because one of the things I hate about our culture as humans and Americans is we never say how much we appreciate people until they're already gone. And then like when someone dies, they're like, oh, I wish I would have said that. So I give everyone a chance. If there's someone you want to say something to that you haven't said it to that you appreciate, whether it's a celebrity or someone you know.
Well, I'd have to say being welcomed into Iowa, or being a New Yorker, being the stranger, being the new kid on the block. I've made more friends here in Iowa, and I'm not counting my close friends in New York, than I ever had in New York at every level, whether it's a banker, someone at the post office, checkers at the supermarket, the people working at LaGrange, people like Steve, who we got to know each other through dance. It's just the people of Iowa. I praised the people of New York before, and I praised the people of Iowa. You are great, warm people. I know you have your differences out here, but it's just a great community. I lived in New York for over 40 years in that one apartment, and when I went to the grocery store for 40 years, I never talked to a single person. And here I can go to Fairway and on a single visit know 20 people who bend my ear when we start talking. I love the teachers over at Vinton Schellsburg. They've been great. I love the kids that I teach history and social studies to. And Iowa has been a great experience for me, just like Woodstock.
It's good. It's good. So I will give mine to my mom, who's been helping me out a lot lately. Appreciate you very much. Without you, I wouldn't be around. But sometimes we take our parents for granted. We shouldn't do that. Now, it's no secret my mom and I have had very strained relationships throughout my life. Mm-hmm. Eventually what's going to happen is this is going to get turned on me, and I'll be the one in that chair having to tell my story, because how can I expect you guys to be open and honest if I'm not open and honest myself? So that's happening soon too. But yeah, just I appreciate your mom, even though we've had our differences and things like that. So, and then the celebrity one, I'm going to give this one again because I gave it before when a big Rolexes, and I forgot to turn off the applause and people stopped watching it. Betty White. Congratulations and thank you, Betty White.
Amazing woman.
God, she's so great. I want to have her on the podcast just because I want to hear about what it was like being a woman breaking into the industry at a time when she did. I mean, they say it's hard now. Could you imagine how hard it was back then?
Yeah.
Like, oh man, I would love to hear some of her stories. So
She's amazing.
she's an American treasure. In fact, her birthday should be a national holiday. I firmly believe that.
Yes.
All right, guys, we got to run. Thank you all very much. I'll give you this
Thank
in
you,
just a few
everyone.
minutes, and hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Stay kind to each other. Much love and all that. We'll see you guys.
We're
That
good?
is the. Whoa, I can stand up. Oh.